Are we going to talk about the new war propaganda movie Alex Garland directed? Dude, I think Civil War, I never even watched it, but I heard it was so ass. It's like every single thing that happens, like we'll get back to Canada in a second, but as far as Alex Garland goes, like every single movie studio, no matter how good they are in their inception, inevitably turns into the same old nonsense. And of course, you know, you're gonna have to do some sweet, juicy pro-American imperialism propaganda. Okay. This is the most okay movie ever for a movie about civil war is allergic to politics. Yeah. We haven't even like run out of ideas, but it's just we operate like we have run out of ideas. Yeah, I really want to watch another show. I really want to watch another show about how, you know, dudes went out there and shot children and then it really fucked them up. Like, I get it. It's a real part of American life, but it's just like how many movies do we have to watch about this? Like, oh, here, Muhammad says, you're not going to believe it, but he's going to kill a child and feel bad about it. Everything is based on memory. Good God. Expect plenty of self-aggrandizing bullshit from a generation of tactical coffee salesmen who enlisted a war to enrich defense oil companies. Like, we did this already. We did this with a lot of stink. We did this with a lot of pizzazz, okay? American movies that are anti-war inherently, that actually cover the awful nature of American imperial domination and the impact that it has on each individual grunt, each individual soldier, the impact that it has on America's victims. We've done this already. Just literally go watch Kubrick. Go watch Full Metal Jacket, okay? We have that. We have Jarhead. Jarhead's even funny and depressing, you know? Like, there are fantastic movies that show the real awful ways in which America goes to war for financial gain. This, on the other hand, is like very obviously, yeah, Generation Kill was pretty good. I feel like all of the new war movies nowadays are just like, they're not anti-war anymore. Or my favorite anti-war film is the World War I one. That was insane. The one from that famous book. God damn it. No, not 1917. No. All Quiet on the Western Front. Go watch All Quiet on the Western Front. Okay? Those are good. That's a fantastic one. No, not Dunkirk. And also, I would say Dunkirk and Band of Brothers are pro-war movies because those are the only good wars. You know what I mean? Those are the only just wars. There is no war that is just but class war. And I do think that there's at least some semblance of you know, anti-fascist action that is appropriate, allowed. Those are the last times that, you know, the Western forces have actually engaged in anti-fascist action and not directly fascist action. But check out In Time, starring Justin Timberlake. It's from 2011. It has nothing to do with war. It's pretty awful, but it's awesome. Thank you, M. Hud. What is this? Clip the Halls? What about Come and See? I haven't seen Come and See. The American Civil War was also justice on. I'm talking about the last time the Western forces fought a just war. Okay? The last time. And they never let you live that down. They were like, yo, remember how good World War II was? This is just like that. Remember how good World War II was? That's why we have to kill so many people in Afghanistan. Remember how good World War II was? That's why we have to kill so many people in Vietnam. Remember how good World War II was? That's why we have to do the Korean War. Remember how good World War II was? That's why we have to destabilize Libya. Remember how good World War II was? That's why we have to do everything in our power to ruin the rest of the planet. And it's like, yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one. And it gets me patriotic too. Whenever I watch Band of Brothers, I see it. But like, it's just, all this shit sucks. Every war movie, good or bad, is an anti-war movie. Spielberg, stupid. Violence is very ambiguous in movies. For example, some films claim to be anti-war, but I don't think I've really seen an anti-war film. Every film about war ends up being pro-war. Truffaut, smart. I don't think so. I guess like you could say that about Full Metal Jacket though, when you think about it, because everybody always thinks of, but I will say, yeah, everybody always thinks about like how sick it is when you have when you're on a helicopter with an M60 strapped to your chest, just mowing down random Vietnamese people. They don't think about like Private Pile. They don't think about how much people get fucked up. You know what I mean? So I think like all movies do end up glorifying ultra violence in some way. All war movies end up glorifying ultra violence in some way. And a lot of people end up taking learning the wrong lessons. Having said that, however, I will reiterate, All Quiet on the Western Front, no glorification, all pain, okay? All guts, no glory. So there are definitely some solid anti-war movies for those with eyes to see that don't even remotely glorify war at all. So I would say that, All Quiet on the Western Front is like a pretty good example of that. Just a horrifying watch. Anyway, let's see. I'm gonna look at this trailer for which is a 2-minute and 24-second trailer, and I'm gonna make up my mind on whether or not this is another these like shoot and cry. If it's another classic shoot and cry flick where it's like a bunch of guys who really wanted to save the country, and they tried to do their very best, which is why they killed a bunch of children and then felt really bad about it. But also, it's still pretty sick. Please join the American military. Or if it's one of those like every part of war is awful and you will inevitably kill yourself, so please do not fucking join. And also, just war is bad and we're only doing this for financial gain type movies. It's less likely that it's the second thing and more likely that it's the first thing, especially considering the A24 trajectory I've seen so far. They went from making incredible flicks, Midsommar style shit, to like whatever the fuck this is.
How's it going?
Going well.
Dre's in this? That's crazy. Damn, dude. My man has made it big. That's wild. He's done it. He did the thing. From Twitch streaming to the fucking silver screen, dude. Congratulations, Nandre. I guess Jack Black wasn't available. How dare you?
That's that new guy energy.
Oh, he's back. That's the 4th fucking time he's done that.
So you're peeking at probing?
Speaking with serious intent to probe.
Alpha 2, we might have guys starting to move in our position.
Copy, we're getting a buildup of activity here too.
Yeah, I definitely see weapons at this point.
Yeah, we have definite massing.
Okay, I have a really solid solution to this. Don't invade another country so that you can extract their natural resources and then get favorable contracts for the vice president's company, Halliburton, to rebuild the country after you blow it into oblivion. I'm just saying, okay? Call me anti-American, but I have a really good solution to this, and it's called don't fucking invade foreign nations, you know? Nah, dude, they were defending my freedom of speech. Yeah, I know. They were out there, dude. They were out there posted up in the Karengal Valley in Afghanistan, overseeing control over the opium trade. Suspiciously, none of it was going to America, only to the European markets, not because they wanted to get additional sources of revenue for CIA black budget operations, but instead because those guys were threatening American free speech. Also, they hate gay people. Exactly. They hate gay people, so that's why they deserve the death penalty by other people who also have questionable beliefs on gay people. Okay, so far, this seems like pro-war nonsense.
Man 08 is profane. We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
This is Frogman 6 Romeo. We need evac at our last known position.
We have severely wounded. Who's the severely wounded? It's not you. Is it me? Who is it?
No, it's not you.
No, is it?
Copy 1, we're in contact 2.
You coming to you or you coming to us?
Stand by.
Like, it's kind of crazy to think, but I just want to put this into perspective. This is someone's house. Like, someone lived there, okay? Someone had a life there. They went to school, okay? They had hopes. They had dreams. Now it's all gone. You know what I mean? Like, I know we only look at the perspective of our brave doorbusters, right? That went down there and were fucking shit up. But like, that's a home. You understand me? People just like you and me used to live there. And yeah, we treat it like it's a Call of Duty map. Oh, fuck.
Copy 1, we're in contact 2.
You coming to you or you coming to us?
Stand by. We'll let you know when we're inbound.
Let's move!
Here's the plan.
EA 5 minutes, over.
The scouts are gonna lead us out, and I'm bringing up the rear. Pop smoke.
Smoke out.
We are all coming back.
OP
1. They are en route to you.
Has anyone looked at you? I'm fucked up.
Unfiltered in real time. This isn't even a movie about poor old soldiers. This is about SEAL Team 5. Yeah.
Where are you guys?
Look for the blood and the smoke. Multiple bad guys trying to get to our position. 1 minute out. We have enemy on our building and all surrounding buildings.
Roger that. Stand by. Going hot.
Yo, Loki, this is Loki Daily Wire. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to American imperialism propaganda, there's no difference there. There's no ideological divergence between the Daily Wire and like whatever some fucking liberal institution is putting out there.
Better get ready.
I don't really give a shit at the end of the day. If it's a good movie, it's a good movie. I'm just kind of bored of these kinds of movies. Like I grew up with a lot of these kinds of movies, right? And nowadays, whenever I see another one of them, I'm like, ugh, just like make something new, man. Make something new, please.
It's gonna hurt.
On my count. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3.
It's kind of interesting thinking about like, you know, mass shootings that occur almost daily and school shootings that occur almost daily. And then we just like sit there and we watch literally elementary school shooting simulators in this, like all the time for fun. You know what I mean? Warfare. A24 has apparently done 2 movies like this recently, specifically about gay people who get trauma from being in the military. Yeah, I don't know. Veteran flicks or actual DI in Hollywood changed my mind. What is this? Basically this meme again. America will bomb your country until there's nothing left and come back 20 years later and make a movie about how sad their soldiers got from doing it. Yeah, it's called Shoot and Cry. Okay? It's you see this in Israel as well. Like it's a classic. I think it's a classic part of, you know, imperial conquest, which is to showcase how human you are, to showcase how like above all of this you are. You know what I mean? Like you did all this violent shit, but also you're much better than the enemies. The enemies are barbaric. The enemies had to be killed, right? But you felt bad doing it. The act of killing itself is barbaric, sure, but you felt bad when you did it. And you are facing the repercussions now of how bad it feels internally. So therefore, you know, you are elite. It's just another way of reinforcing, I think, Western cultural superiority. Does that make sense? You know, 2-minute trailer, mind is set. Osmongold will be proud. Yeah, I think, no, you're absolutely right. Okay. You're absolutely right on that. I am watching just a 2-minute flick. I'm just saying, conceptually speaking, the way I look at war movies, if we're going to talk about like video games, right? The way I look at war movies at this point, especially that kind of war movie, is that it's fucking identical to like, you know, the same exact IP being juggled over and over again, being recycled over and over again. That's what it is. So yeah, my immediate approach to it is like, ugh, boring. Another fucking war movie. Here we go. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I'll still, you know, I will still wait. I'll still wait to see what it looks like. But sometimes you want something different. Sometimes you want to experience something different. And if it's all Call of Duty, then at a certain point, it turns into Call of Booty. All right, what is this? Lacey is trying to do a subathon or something. You guys sent me this link.
Everybody gift me subs, come on! Why aren't you guys fucking gifting? Why aren't you fucking gifting?
I mean, this is rage bait. This isn't serious.
My subathon's gonna end! Why aren't you fucking gifting? No! Gift me subs, please! Everybody gift me subs, come on!
Don't care if his rage bait is pathetic. Yeah. I think about this quite a bit. I think that streaming is unique because it ends up merging between the universe of like scripted fake content that is solely created for the purpose of enjoyment for your entertainment, and also you know, real world shit that is happening in an unscripted manner. So because it combines both of those universes, a lot of people never understand, like a lot of people don't understand how to interpret it. And it kind of turns into like the Nathan Fielder dynamic, where people got mad at Nathan Fielder for you know, using using the canvas of the real world to make his to make his point, right? Using real people. And I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing where, like, I think a lot of people look at it as like pure entertainment and enjoy it and understand it, but it is also totally reliant on the audience's reception. If you like this person, you kind of understand it. Okay? If you like this person, you kind of understand it. It's just a fucking meme. If you don't like the person, then it's very serious, and this is a real person who's crying, and also he should feel bad. Theo Vaughn and Timothy Chalamet talk about phase. Timothy Chalamet knows what phase is. That's crazy. Newer streamers are using the concept of the clip to set up bits, and not even always for comedy. Like, why did that guy lie about getting his ad revenue cut law? Yeah, they do it for drama. They do it for... I mean, I've been watching clips of the Phase Boys quite a bit. Like, Jason the Ween said he was going to quit. There was, I think, some drama between a girl that was on his stream that he was, making content with. And then another Phase guy, like, stole his girl or whatever. They're just doing engagement bait. So it's usually just for attention. And also, more importantly, for the sake of entertainment. Do you understand?
The latest in the fallout from the...
For the sake of entertainment. So it's not real. It's not real, and you're not supposed to take it, and you're not supposed to treat it as real. Don't you find that weird, though? I mean, to a certain degree, I think that, yes, it is. But, like, it's also kind of saying that, like, WWE is fucked up. Because, like, is it real or is it not real? Like, why are they faking something? You know what I mean? It's like pro wrestling. But because this is a relatively new thing, it's a relatively new medium, and there are real human beings involved as well, and then audiences treat it as though they are real. No, Kason wasn't lying about ads. Kason actually did get his ads cut. No, another one of the Phase streamers was saying like, "Oh, I've actually lost it" or whatever. But it's like reality TV. But then there's also the other side of it as well, right? There's also the other side of it as well, because like people do actually get sad, you know, people do actually get sad in the process. Audiences get emotionally invested. They treat it as though it's real, and then they fucking lose their minds. It's a really interesting thing to think about, the merger between what is real and what is not real, what is content and what is not supposed to be content. But anyway, I'm going to go pee really quickly. This is a YouTube video that says anti-war films don't exist. Okay. I'm going to start this, and I'll be back in a second.
There's no such thing as an anti-war film. These are the words of Francois Truffaut, and there are different ways to interpret this remark, but it's widely agreed that Truffaut was suggesting that movies will inevitably glorify combat when they portray the adventure and thrill of conflict. When Truffaut made this comment, he was referring to Stanley Kubrick's 1957 film, Paths of Glory, which is considered by many as the greatest anti-war film ever made. But in the same interview, Truffaut continues this remark. I find that violence is very ambiguous in movies. For example, some films claim to be anti-war, but I don't think I've really seen an anti-war film. Every film about war ends up being pro-war. I love a lot of the films that Truffaut is talking about. But the strange thing is, I don't entirely disagree with what Truffaut is saying. If you look at the science behind war movies, and the effect they have on our brain, Truffaut is actually right in a lot of ways. Regardless of genre or subject matter, at their core, all films are created as a form of entertainment, and our minds are consciously aware of that, but it still reacts. In a study conducted at Washington University regarding the psychology of movies, Professor Jeff Zaks states, "You know there is nothing up there on the screen that can touch you or hurt you or pull you out of your chair, but we react as if they can. This is where neurocinematics comes into the equation. Neurocinematics is an area of research that explores the impact of film on the human brain, combining insights from neuroscience, psychology, and film studies. A leader in this field of research is Yuri Hassan, whose work utilizes MRI scans to measure the brain activity of a subject whilst they view a movie.
This guy does actually sound like Nathan Fielder. Okay, but here's the thing. Okay? All Quiet on the Western Front is like a fantastic example. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to say that it's not like or not All Quiet on the Western Front? Sorry. Zone of Interest is also another fantastic example. I wonder if it's because it doesn't feature any of the war aspect of the war itself, that it actually is not considered like It actually has no, it's not a war movie. It's a movie about the Holocaust, but also without even showing the Holocaust at all.
Studies reveal that certain films can exert considerable control over brain activity, with the degree of influence varying based on the film's content, editing, and directing style, meaning that directors can literally influence how our brain is working through their filmmaking choices. Filmmaking is an art form that literally lives and dies through its choices. It's controlled entirely by the intent of the filmmakers. Everything that's put on screen is put there intentionally, and it's done so with the intent of creating an emotional response. Right now you may be freely looking around your room, out the window, or at your coffee cup on your desk, but in cinema you can't do this. Everything we see is curated by a director. Every gunshot, every explosion, every drop of blood, and every tear is there because it was put there intentionally to elicit a response. And this is where we begin to enter a paradox. Because in the case of most anti-war films, the emotion that our brains respond with is adrenaline. The paradoxical effect anti-war films have on the human brain, particularly through the elicitation of adrenaline, underscores a complex psychological phenomenon. It's a strange thing, because even though these films aim to depict the horrors and futility of war, their intense and often graphic portrayals can inadvertently trigger the body's adrenaline response. This response, characterized by heightened physical and mental alertness, is not inherently negative. The rush of adrenaline, therefore, transforms a viewing experience into one of excitement and heightened engagement, regardless of a film's heavy subject matter. Consequently, an intended anti-war message may be overshadowed by the viewer's physiological and emotional response, illustrating the intricate interplay between film content, brain chemistry, and viewer perception.
I don't know. Like, so what is it? Is it that just like, if there's anything that tickles your brain receptors in a positive manner, or not even in a positive manner, but if there's anything in the fucking war movie that like pumps up your adrenaline, then automatically it's like, it's pro-war? Especially because for a war movie to like, regardless of its intentionality of the director and the writer, for a war movie to, I guess, sell well, there has to be like at least some kind of ultra violence, some kind of action, and oftentimes they put that in, and then that kind of undermines the intention of the war movie. It's also it's best represented with the phenomena of Starship Troopers. It is a anti-fascist film. Starship Troopers deliberately is created as an anti-fascist work, not the book itself, but the actual movie. Okay? And yet there are a million people that just kind of watch it as like, oh, they're killing all these bugs. That's kind of funny, whatever. And then there are people who actually watch it and go, oh, this is pro-military. I go so far as to say that like the over-the-top jingoistic sentiment, the chauvinism, the inhumanity, like all of that is oftentimes people take a back seat. Like people's reception of the work, the actual intention of the work takes a back seat because there is a lot of like cool scenes. Zone of Interest is pro-Nazi, I feel. What? No. What? Zone of Interest was written, and first of all, Zone of Interest is a book. And the depiction is directed by a person who is a direct descendant of Holocaust survivors. And there is not a single aspect of that movie that is pro-Nazi. I was going to use Zone of Interest as a great example of like, a movie that leaves nothing on the table. To be fair, I've seen valid criticism that even if it's anti-fascist, the amount of screen time given to those ideas is so limited that it fails its goal of being anti-fascist. No, because then I also run into the other problem, which is making things specifically so that there's no subtlety, making art less subtle so that like everyone gets the point. It's not supposed to be a lecture. It's show, don't tell. Okay? So I want artists to be able to demonstrate their fucking vision without constantly trying to make agitated propaganda. Okay? Just because the broad audience has no media literacy skills and no way of like critically examining the work and basically looks at it and says, oh, this right here is what you see is what you get. So Top Gun is pro-war? Yes, of course Top Gun is pro-war. What are you talking about? 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 What are it is overtly pro-war. That's not what we're talking about. I don't think anybody hides that Top Gun is pro-war. It's like it is a franchise created directly to like, you know, get more people to sign up to the Air Force. Yeah, Top Gun is both pro-war and pro having gay sex with your best friend and not having any sort of straight sex with women, no matter how hard they try. Like literally, that's a very important part of Top Gun. A lot of people forget that it is absolutely about having homosexual sex with your besties, your guy friends. Yeah, it is Air Force propaganda. Anyway, my point is, what do? Do you make anti-war movies that don't have any sort of like glorified depictions of ultra violence? Like, do you urge artists to put forth a more blunt, more obvious, less subtle way of doing advocacy and just like trying to make things more boring and educational? I feel like that is awful.
And I think there's a lot of films that claim to be anti-war that really fall victim to this. In fact, some of these films I really, really love. It saddens me to say it, but films like Saving Private Ryan, Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now, Paths of Glory, and Dunkirk all lose their impact as anti-war films because fundamentally, they glorify it. Let's take a look at Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, for example. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite films.
Me too.
And for the longest time, I saw Full Metal Jacket as the
Shit fucked me up when I was a kid, dude. Shit fucked me up when I was a kid. I was like, damn, I think it was the first time I realized why they have like rating systems in place. Because when I saw Private Pile blow his shit up, I was like, as a child, okay, as a young boy, I think I was like 12 or 13 or something. I was like, oh fuck, I don't think I was supposed to see this. Like, I literally still remember I watched it on VHS, I think. If I'm not misremembering, I might have been a DVD. But literally, when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, I don't think I'm supposed to see. I think like in something unlocked in my mind where I was like, I'm pretty sure I will never be the same again after this moment.
Embodiment of the anti-war genre, but it really isn't. The dehumanizing first and second halves of Full Metal Jacket definitely don't intend to paint a flattering picture of military life. Yet, R. Lee Ermey's abusive drill sergeant has become somewhat of a folk hero, and the 1,000-yard stare has come to signify badassery rather than an unwashable stain on one's soul. The action meant to simulate the dread and misery of war instead becomes riveting and addictive. So if none of these films are anti-war films, then what is? In 1998, whilst promoting his film Saving...
That's why when you do anti-war flicks, if you can't do any anti-war flicks, you can only cover war from the side that is just. Okay? That's why the real like way to solve this problem is covering Vietnam from the perspective of the Vietnamese, not the South Vietnamese government, but straight up from the North Vietnamese, from the perspective of Ho Chi Minh. You talk about Band of Brothers, you talk about Saving Private Ryan, that's fine. That's the right side. Okay? So if you do a flick about Vietnam, you got to cover it from the perspective of the Vietnamese who were fighting against the American invaders. I'm just saying. It's called Star Wars. They already did that. It's literally called Star Wars, one of the most fucking famous franchises that America has ever created. Very openly and very intentionally, George Lucas said, I saw the Vietnam War and I wanted to make something from the perspective of the Vietnamese. That's what it's called. Except it failed to get that message across because Americans literally don't understand that they are the villains in that story. And also, I'll take it one step further. I've heard stories of like Navy cruisers playing the fucking Imperial Death March, openly adopting the villain role.
Private Ryan. Steven Spielberg took opposition to Truffaut's comments. In fact, he stated the complete opposite. Any war movie, good or bad, is an anti-war movie. I don't think what Spielberg is saying here is right, but I think to disprove
I don't agree with that, by the way. I definitely don't agree with Spielberg's
comments. We need to look at what exactly defines an anti-war film. And to do that, let's take a look at what many people consider the definitive anti-war film, Elem Klimov's Come and See. The film throws us into the abyss of World War II through the eyes of Floria, a Belarusian teenager eager to join the fight against the Nazis. But Come and See transcends the genre by wielding its visceral violence not for entertainment, but as a searing indictment of war's inhumanity. The film's brutality is unrelenting. Klimov doesn't shy away from depicting the unimaginable, Burning villages, mass executions, and the psychological
I gotta watch this.
torment inflicted on civilians are shown with a horrifying intimacy.
Jesus
This
Christ.
unflinching portrayal is born from Klimov's personal experiences. Klimov is a survivor of the Battle of Stalingrad. As a child, he and his family escaped the city by crossing the Volga in a makeshift raft. Having seen the devastation of war firsthand, he refused to sanitize it for the screen. Come and See doesn't portray war as the grand conquest for a just cause. It's about the
They're saying it's free to watch on YouTube. I might do a fucking... I might do it. I might do a Moby night. It'll fuck you up, dude. Yeah, the full film is available on YouTube for free. It's fucking devastating. Yeah, I might do it.
erosion
Don't
of
test me.
innocence. Floria, initially wide-eyed with naive patriotism, transforms into a hollow shell. His youthful spirit is completely devoured by the carnage around him. This is where Come and See's anti-war message transcends other films. It doesn't offer catharsis through victory or the comfort of clear heroes and villains. Here, everyone is a victim caught
It's
in
full
a
of TOS
maelstrom of
content,
violence.
little bro. You know, like, movie depictions of ultra violence is not a terms of service violation because it's fake. It's real gore that is actually a terms of service violation, unless it's a depiction of nudity. If there's a lot of like real nudity, then yes, you can't show that. But you can show fake blood. What are you talking about?
The film forces us to confront the true cost of war, not just in the lives that have been lost, but in the fracturing of humanity itself. This is why I think Come and See serves as a perfect benchmark for creating a criteria that defines whether a film is truly anti-war. So here's my criteria. Number 1,
Oh yeah, if there's some sexual violence, then yeah, you can't. I don't think you can show that.
the film should avoid portraying war as a noble or heroic endeavor. Instead, it should focus on the senselessness and moral ambiguity of conflict. Number 2, the film must depict the widespread devastation caused by war, including the impact on civilians, soldiers, and the environment. Number 3, the film should be informed by the personal experiences of those who have lived through war, providing an authentic and unflinching perspective. And off the top of my head, I can only think of 2 other films that conform to this. Firstly is Larisa Shepitko's The Ascent, based on a novel by Belarusian writer Vasyl Bykov. The film is set during World War II and follows 2 Soviet partisans as
I don't know if I agree with this because the defense of the Soviet Union wasn't a pointless war. No, I think the point of it is if something is supposed to be anti-war, then I think the idea is that like if you're a full-blown humanist, if you're a full-blown like maximalist when it comes to being a anti-war humanist, then your attitude is supposed to be that like any violence is bad and that there is a lot of moral ambiguity in war, in the ways in which people fight. Like if you're a full-blown pacifist, that's where you're supposed to. That's your approach conceptually to war. The difference, however, is that not many people are actually like that. I'm certainly not like that. I think that there is a concept of just war. Yes, I think that defensive actions taken against those who are fighting are just. The issue is everybody claims that their actions are defensive. You know what I mean? The reality of the matter, however, is that even just wars are still horrifying and end up taking away the humanity of those who participate in it on either side.
they struggle to survive whilst evading Nazi capture. The Ascent portrays the internal and external struggles of its characters without resorting to heroic tropes. The film's focus is on the moral dilemmas faced by the protagonists, highlighting the complexity and futility of their situation. The film vividly depicts the physical and psychological toll of war, with its harsh, snow-covered landscape serving as a powerful metaphor for the desolation and despair spread by conflict. Larisa Shepitko's father was a high-ranking officer in the military. When talking about her childhood, this is what she had to say. "My father fought all through the war. To me, the war was one of the most powerful early impressions. I remember feeling upset, the family separated. I remember hunger and how our mother and us were evacuated. The impression of a global calamity certainly left an indelible mark on my mind." The next film that conforms to this criteria is Masaki Kobayashi's Human Condition trilogy. Masaki Kobayashi's Human Condition trilogy is a sprawling exploration of the
My dad is a devout pacifist Christian, but seems to think the Korean War was the closest thing to a just war. Is that just ignorance? Yes. It's not just like any... That is like that is an incredibly ignorant position. Like, it is completely unacceptable is wildly ignorant and completely unacceptable. You should show your dad my coverage over the Korean War from a couple days prior. I think it was on Saturday, where I talked about the Korean War and talked about like the development of the authoritarian, brutal dictatorship in South Korea that the American government propped up and also defended, militarily defended, in the lead up to the Korean War, and you know the genocidal actions that America engaged in the Korean War, and then in the aftermath of the Korean War as well. Yeah. If you're on the right side during a just war, you commit heinous acts of depravity. Britain was on the right side in World War II, yet they genocided millions of Bengali. America was on the right side of World War II, yet they murdered countless civilians in Dresden and Hiroshima. Exactly.
Human cost of war. The trilogy follows Kaji, a pacifist and socialist, as he navigates the horrors of World War II and its aftermath. The trilogy presents a stark and unflinching portrayal of the brutality and inhumanity of war. Kaji's journey is one of moral and ethical struggle, not of heroism or glory. The trilogy covers a vast range of experiences, from the labor camps to the battlefield, providing a comprehensive view of war's devastation, depicting the suffering of soldiers, prisoners, and civilians alike. Kobayashi's own experiences as a soldier who refused to fight and was subsequently imprisoned deeply influenced his work. His personal commitment to pacifism and his first-hand knowledge of war's horrors are glaringly evident throughout the trilogy. While Truffaut's assertion that there's no such thing as an anti-war film holds weight in many cases, films like Come and See, The Ascent, and the Human Condition trilogy completely challenge this notion. They demonstrate that it is possible to—
I'm not gonna lie, it is a little sad, a little suspicious, and you're right to call this out, that we do not have a single damn fucking movie that actually even broaches like being anti-war from the Western world in like the last decade. I guess, like I said, I mean, judging by his analysis, he does not consider All Quiet on the Western Front to be that. I do think All Quiet on the Western Front is a pretty solid anti-war movie. And I mean, Zone of Interest doesn't technically approach World War II. It simply talks about the German reception, the careerist German reception to the heinous acts, the heinous atrocities that they engaged in the Holocaust. So there's some. This guy wouldn't consider them to be anti-war, though, even though I would. Hacksaw Ridge is American anti-war. I haven't seen Hacksaw Ridge, so I don't know. Maybe.
Create a cinematic experience that truly conveys the horrors of war without succumbing to the allure of spectacle. However, these films are extremely rare and require a delicate balance to avoid the pitfalls that Truffaut was warning against. Ultimately, the power of these films lies in their ability to make us pause and reflect more deeply on war's horrific nature and the senselessness of it all, and how dangerous it actually is to glorify it. Thanks for watching the video, and be sure to subscribe. If you want to see more content like this, then support the channel by heading over to our Patreon page, where you'll get exclusive access to behind-the-scenes content, early access to videos.
Hell yeah! This was a great YouTube video. You should get the filmmakers of No Other Land on stream, a film about Palestinian displacement made before October 7th is getting awards all over the place, probably getting an Oscar nom. I don't think it's reasonable to say that the beauty and curation that goes in the movies can shift its overall meaning completely. It seems to me that exaggeration of violence will exist in Hollywood-esque war movies, but that doesn't mean it's pro-war. I mean, if you want to have a conversation about what is unironically and unconditionally pro-war and pro-American imperialism, it's the fucking Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, I think those movies play a more formative role in developing like good-bad dynamics and also righteous violence in the minds of unsuspecting Americans in a way that is insidious, significantly more than like a show that unintentionally ends up, a movie that unintentionally ends up giving you like somewhat of a glorification of violence while it is trying to genuinely, earnestly, intentionally tell you that war is bad. That is my, I guess, somewhat hot take. Not to say that like those movies shouldn't exist or anything. I'm not like this is just criticism, right? And I need people to understand that you can still watch these fucking movies. Like, who gives a shit? You know, I don't care. But I hope you understand that like that is what this is. I think those movies end up doing more to justify this kind of stuff than even a movie like fucking Chris Kyle, if that makes sense. And I mean it. Like, I think Chris Kyle is slop, right? What is it, like Lone Survivor, Chris Kyle? These kinds of movies are like directly created to propagandize American military action, okay? And I say that the Marvel Cinematic Universe plays either the same level of like pro-American imperialism or even more, for sure. All right, let's see what Timothy Charlemagne had to say about FaZe Clan.
Grandnephew, and he kind of looked like Bob, and he said, "Can we get a picture?" And then he put his finger out and he said, "You FaZe?" And then I said, "Well, like the video,
FaZe Clan?
like the video game?" He said, "No, never mind."
The new Dylan, so even all the Dylans are unique.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
You FaZe?
You
I don't
FaZe
know.
with the finger like that.
I don't know. I mean, I know.
Okay, I don't think these guys know what the fuck phasing up is.
FaZe Banks. I don't know a lot of the FaZe guys. I know that one of them gave CPR to Sketch one night or something when he wasn't doing good.
Whoa.
Dude, Vaughn, he says a whole bunch of insane shit, but he never ceases, in my opinion. I don't know if he's dumbing himself down or not. He never ceases to make me laugh in the way that he conceptualizes things that happen. His mind works in mysterious ways, okay? I don't know if it's intentional and he's like a brilliant comic, or he's just like that naturally, but it's fucking hilarious. Update happening now from Madison, Wisconsin. Okay. All right, let's dive into some serious shit that's not so fun.
To make sure that today well and that everyone else was safe. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and start my remarks. Today truly is a sad day for Madison and for our country. It is a day that I believe will live in our collective minds for a very, very long time. Here are the details. Today at 10:57 a.m., our team was called to the Abundant Life Christian School in reference to an active shooter. We know that 3 people are dead, including the suspect shooter. We know that the suspect shooter was a teenage student who attended the school. At this time, we're not releasing the age or gender of the student or any other identifying remarks about the student. 2 other people have died that died were a teacher and a teenage student. 6 other people were injured. 2 students are now in critical condition in the hospital, and these injuries are considered life-threatening injuries. 4 students are also at other area hospitals with non-life-threatening injuries. These are just the physical injuries that we know about. We know that this was the middle of the day of a school day, and so there will be other injuries that we'll have to face for a very, very long time. And we're going to do everything we can as a community to heal those injuries as well. Many of you have asked me about the why of this. Why did this happen? What do we know? What was the motivation? I do not know. But I will tell you this, our detectives are working hard in the investigative process to find out as many answers as we can so that we can further prevent these things from happening, not only in this community, but in other communities around our country. I think we can all agree that enough is enough. We have to come together to do everything we can to support our students, to prevent press conferences like these from happening again and again and again. The school building itself is clear. We have cleared the school. There's no other threats or danger to the community. We're in the process now of what we call reunification. And what that simply means is making sure that every student that was in the school is present and accounted for and returned to their loved ones. This usually takes a while, but we have practiced, unfortunately, and practice, and that's why we're able to reunify students with their parents within hours of a school shooting. Reunification is taking place at the Dean Clinic on Stoughton Road, and I certainly thank them for their help. Again, we need our public to find an alternate route. If that is your normal way home as we get closer to the end of the day, please be patient or find another route home. We're currently processing the scene. We're interviewing those who may have been witnesses, and we're obtaining search warrants to get additional information. And lastly, I want to just say thank you to everyone who's standing behind me, the organizations and agencies that they represent, men and women of the Madison.
I want to remind everybody that America is the only country where the police do not advocate for more gun control. Just something to consider.
Many of you know
America
this
is
about
the
me.
only nation on the planet where police coalitions do not advocate for more gun control, but less gun control. They either never mention it or are directly antagonistic to gun control. Every other fucking country, every other nation, cops are oftentimes at the forefront of advocacy for gun control.
Community to do everything possible to ensure that it's not only a special place, but a safe place as well. And we're going to continue to do that. So we ask for your patience as information is coming in.
That's how busted. That's how busted American minds are. That's how busted we are as a nation.
Information, but we want to make sure that
gun control is not a leftist position. Working people cannot be disarmed. Yeah, man, shut the fuck up.
On this particular incident,
You're a fucking idiot. Okay, America is already in the throes of fascism, and your dumbass is over here being like, "Oh, gun control is not a leftist position." Yes, it is. Okay, yes, it fucking is. Reasonable gun safety measures is absolutely a fucking normal position. It's not left or right. It's just common sense. You're a goddamn idiot fantasizing about a fucking violent, militant vanguard revolution that is never going to happen. Shut the fuck up.
The fire department is a part of this community, much like all of the folks standing up here with me today. Our hearts are with and our arms are around everybody impacted today and everybody within our community. With that, I won't repeat the details.
Yeah, they think common sense is disarming the working class.
Activity for today, much like Chief Barnes.
Like I'm sorry, dude, if you're a psychotic person, like if you're a chronically depressed person, you shouldn't be able to have a gun, okay? Straight up. You could call me ableist all day, every day. I'm the most ableist motherfucker on the planet, okay? If you are a person who routinely experiences mental health episodes, you should not be able to have a gun because you will use that gun either on yourself or on others, okay? It is incredibly likely. Sorry, it's just the truth. And I find it very strange that you can't even talk about this. Like there's this broken understanding is so embedded in the minds of every dumb Amerifat that like you even find this supposedly Marxist position on no, the working class must be armed to the fucking gills, like to the arm to the teeth. Meanwhile, the American government's response to now, I believe the number is like 14 veterans killing themselves every single day, is basically telling them like, here, we'll give you a free lock on your gun safe. And put a photo of your family in that gun safe too, so you don't fucking kill yourself in the last moments. Like you look at that, and there's like one extra hurdle that you need to overcome in the moment. That's how fucked up the situation is.
Thank you, Chiefs, both of you.
I don't understand. I say this as someone who enjoys shooting guns. Okay, I say this as someone who enjoys shooting guns. The notion that like guns are anything but a fun hobby is ridiculous. The idea that like we are more safe because we have more guns is demonstrably false, and yet people still make this argument. It is so shocking, especially in the eve of yet another mass shooting at another school. It's crazy. That encourages depressed people to keep it to themselves, though. I wouldn't associate depressed people with mentally deranged mass shooters. What are you talking about? 50% of the gun violence that happens in this country happens because people kill themselves with guns. The fuck?
As you've heard already, this is a whole of government response. It is not just.
What are you talking about?
It is not just City of Madison.
Yes, dude, if you have suicidal ideation, you shouldn't have a gun. It literally makes the process easier, okay?
In both the initial immediate response.
The fuck? I'm not saying if suicidal people go and like do mass shootings. That's not what I'm saying at all. But they do sometimes kill themselves with their fucking guns.
And the governor and others in the federal government and state.
How do you enforce laws on a subjective medical diagnosis? You force it by law at the federal level. You say, if you want a gun, you need to not only get an adequate fucking brain dead take. Yo, fuck you for propagating a fucking stigma that you're not at all qualified to talk about, fucking idiot. I love this, dude. I love this. I love when dumbass Amerifats come in here and fucking chirp at me about how you don't understand. You're actually stigmatizing mental illness by saying people who are chronically depressed should not be able to have guns, because I believe that the primary purpose of government is to protect its citizenry, okay? Sometimes that means requiring motherfuckers to wear seatbelts when they're too stupid not to wear seatbelts. Sometimes it's to require motherfuckers not to drink and drive when they're too stupid to drink and drive. You will not be able to outwoke me on this context by being like, excuse me, sweetie. Excuse me, sweetie. You're actually being quite ableist. You're stigmatizing people with mental health. Yeah, dude. The overwhelming majority of people who are chronically depressed or have bipolar disorder or any number of different mental health complications in the community understand that reality. Okay, being depressed doesn't mean you can't decide your life is not worth living. You can value your own life while being depressed. I agree for more gun control, but saying depressed equals can't defend themselves. No, no, you're wrong. Okay, you're fucking wrong. Here's why you're wrong. The notion that guns are necessary for self-defense is already a fucking idiotic notion, okay? You have eaten that propaganda hook, line, and sinker. This country will be infinitely less violent and infinitely more safe if we just wiped out all the guns. Now, you can say that's not going to happen. We can never do that. There's too many guns. There's more guns in circulation than there are people. And that's fine. I understand that. But you cannot argue against that reality. America, out of all of the other comparable OECD nations, is the one that has an overwhelming amount of gun violence. I wonder why. I wonder what the reason is. They have the same rates of mental illness, okay? We have comparable rates of mental health complications in this country. Why do we have significantly more gun violence? Because we have more guns, that's it. And we have no restrictions on who can have those guns. And it is unironically a direct byproduct of the interest, the for-profit interest of gun manufacturers, which is why it blows my mind that so many quote-unquote lefties will eat that propaganda hook, line, and sinker, not realizing that you are serving the interests of gun manufacturers so they can turn profits. It's so stupid. America is literally the only place on the planet this exists. In Australia, I cannot simply comprehend someone like my dad with bipolar and depression with diagnosed with cancer saying, hey, my son, check out this new gun I bought from a fucking Walmart. Yeah. Gun for me, but not guns for thee, head ass. No, guns for nobody. Or if you're gonna have a gun, it should be heavily restricted. That's it. The primary purpose of a weapon is to end life. Okay? That's it. That's the primary purpose of a weapon. It's fun to shoot it. I get it. I shoot it. I enjoy it. But people should be able to demonstrate the responsibility of owning a weapon like that. People should have to at least identify themselves when they are purchasing a weapon. People should be able to go through rigorous background checks and mental health checks before being able to purchase a weapon with the primary purpose of ending your life or ending other people's lives. Saying that everybody should be able to get a gun is basically saying, like, everyone should be able to, everyone should be able to get a fucking driver's license. Like, we have restrictions. And cars are a necessity for commerce. Cars are a necessity to be able to function in a car-reliant infrastructure. Guns are not a necessity in the same vein. It blows my mind that people still make these arguments every time there's another mass shooting. Okay? Why is restricting murder machines such a fucking issue? It should be more regulated than cars than anything else. I know. Jesus, bro, is just talking and not explaining why I was wrong. Wait, what? You said I'm wrong and that you're telling me and then claim I'm an IRA shill? What? I think I demonstrated why you're wrong. Okay? Guns are for self-defense, not a hobby, is a falsehood that the gun lobby and the gun manufacturers have concocted. The likelihood that you will accidentally discharge or use the gun inappropriately is infinitely higher than you actually using it to intercept a situation where your life is in threat. Okay? There are a million studies on this. So the notion that guns are for self-defense is already fucking stupid. It's completely made up. It is. But it's one that is so pervasive. It is a narrative that is so pervasive that has unironically created a need for guns because everybody has a gun, so you got to have a gun as well. It's literally, it's just so stupid.
We know it was confined to one space. Do not know if it was a classroom things that we've gotten very good at, certainly different from
in so many instances of mass shootings and whatnot, okay? The overwhelming majority of mass shootings or overwhelming majority of shooters are actually apprehended and stopped by unarmed, law-abiding citizens, okay? They swarm. And that is after the killer usually ends up shooting a bunch of people. This is why you have a gun problem. Listen to these crazy chatters. Yeah, this is a community that's supposed to be like super progressive, and yet even in a community of like super progressive, like-minded individuals, there's still going to be a shit ton of people who are just like, I love guns. I think you're a pussy. I love guns, and I think like everyone should be able to have them. I love guns, and I'm going to overthrow a tyrannical government in the immediate aftermath of yet another mass shooting that occurred at another school shooting. It's like, it is, I think, one of the most obvious problems in modern American society is the mass availability of weapons, and how much that has very clearly increased gun violence. Do you think these guys will be there with their guns to overthrow the tyrannical government when Donald Trump refuses to relinquish control? No, of course not. Of course not. I do not have an issue with people having guns, okay? Although I believe that we would be living in an infinitely better society if, you know, nobody had guns. Having said that, however, okay, and this is something that I've covered a million times over, at the very least, we need common sense gun violence prevention methods. And that requires regulation and restriction. And the relatively modern false interpretation of the Second Amendment that plays a massive role in Americans politicizing their commodity fetish has caused this ginormous collapse and is a endless hurdle against this sort of thing. Everything, if we're going to talk about this from the perspective of like cultural signifiers, like things that we associate with our identity, guns, just like every other commodity, is not just a thing that you own for a purpose. It's not like your pan, okay? It's not like a replaceable commodity. It becomes something more than that. When you own a gun, you become a gun guy. You know, you have a gun, you like guns, you know the different kinds of bullets, you learn more about guns. There's an endless sea of information out there on YouTube and on social media where you can just like get, you know, you can get gun magazines. You become a gun sexual. It becomes a part of your life. It becomes a part of your identity. And not only is it a part of your identity, even though it's basically just like a fucking, no different than like purchasing Gucci bags or some shit, okay? And that's like your hyperfixation. You like fashion or whatever, and you like, you know, Gucci bags. So you just buy a bunch of Gucci bags. Hassan, such a lib on this topic? No, I'm not. And if you think, if you're mistaken common sense with liberalism, then that's your fault, okay? Yeah, I'm such a lib on this topic. People love China, okay? People talk about like how dope China is, okay? And how socialist China is. What are the Chinese gun laws then? See, my hot tech is a gun pervert. I think firearms also reflect like an ego thing. I see firearms as cool, but not different than like a really cool power tool. Not as a flex type thing, because people will take selfies with their AR-15s, but I've never seen someone take a selfie with a Milwaukee impact driver. Yeah, no, that you're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right about that. Anyway, people are like paternalism is bad when it comes to guns, and then advocate for universal health care. Yeah, no, all matter of government action is paternalistic. You are supposed to write rules and restrictions and regulations for the dumbest person in society. That's how you protect people, both from themselves and potentially from others as well. That's in the most reductive terms, that's what governance is about. Okay? Anyway, here, let's continue.
Yes, obviously, once we have identified, we have initiated a search, but we think that search is either ongoing now or that search may be concluded. Of course, it's about safety. That's the first thing. Making sure that people are safe.
Oh, so mentally ill people are the dumbest people in society? I don't know, but you might be an incredibly dumb person if you think that that's the only people that shouldn't have guns, is what I'm saying. if that's what you derived out of this commentary, then you might be both mentally ill and also one of the most intellectually disabled people I've ever encountered on this website. And there's plenty. It's a target-rich environment.
Some of your patients.
Are you aware, had the school had any prior threats? And then just, jumping off of that, do you know if the shooter had any prior contact with law enforcement?
We do not know that the shooter had any prior contact with law enforcement, but I did do a check of the school. There were some calls, but they were like 911 hang-ups, things of that nature. There was nothing that suggested that the school was a place that violence would occur.
Chief, I know that you mentioned that the shooter died of a self-inflicted gun wound. Did that happen before officers arrived at the school or when the shooter saw officers coming into the school?
Yeah, so let me say that the cause and manner in which the shooter died will be determined by the inmate. But what I can tell you is the shooter was dead upon our arrival, police department arrival, and no officers fired their weapons.
Oh, look at that. Yet another shocking instance where
I'm sorry.
Yet another shocking instance where a mass shooting ended with the shooter killing themselves or possibly being apprehended. That's usually how it goes.
And make sure that everyone is okay. And then if there's any evidence that we think we need to collect, we could only do that with the use of a search warrant. And so again, we have to determine if there is evidence that we will need. Everyone wants to know what led up to this. Are there any additional threats to public safety? Is this person or was this person by themselves? There are a lot of questions that we want to answer, but we have to answer the safety questions first, and then we'll move on to some of the more investigatory questions.
Are you in possession of any of the shooter's devices?
I am not, no.
Meaning that you were not a fan, and that this school probably doesn't have them, and do you know other schools that do? Do you think that that's something we should start talking about, metal detectors in schools?
I guess the question is, would you want your child to go to a school with or without metal detectors?
I can't answer that.
I can't.
Right now, without them.
Yeah, more metal detectors.
Is to create the safest environment that we can without metal detectors.
Wouldn't it make sense to arm the teachers? Yes, dude, totally. The solution to the problem is fucking more guns, actually. Arm the teachers. Arm the children is what I say. I think the children must not remain unarmed. They should have the opportunity to defend themselves, Just like Israel. Arm the kids. Israel has a right to defend itself. The children have a right to defend themselves. Arm everybody.
Important to the students, very important. It's a time for family. Students probably getting ready to go out on break. And now the break will be a little less about celebrating Christmas than more about celebrating
the only way,
perhaps friends and loved ones and staff members.
The only way to solve society's violence problem
to, of course,
is by
keep
creating more opportunities of ultra violence.
Christian school in your thoughts and in your prayers, and we'll get a couple more. Okay.
Okay, real quick, Phoebe.
So it's a private school that takes public money through the voucher system. So what has this revealed about maybe gaps in security or training for staff? Is that something you're thinking about whether schools that are private that take public money need to be, kind of on par with public schools when it comes to security?
Well, what I'm telling you is that in 1997, I began my professional career as a public school teacher. I taught history for 4 years before becoming a police officer. So I did not get far enough to take courses in administration and budgeting of schools. I don't know what governs private schools, if they receive money, where that comes from.
This guy used to be a
someone who's
beneficial member of society
in the school system, and what their requirements.
How do you go from being a teacher to a cop, dude? That's crazy.
But you could probably compare what has happened or what goes on, their security measures, with the security measures of any school.
How much you want to bet if they paid teachers better, he would not be in this position right now? He'd still be a teacher.
How did that inform your game plan today, and how quickly were your officers able to get into the school? What were they told to do?
Sure. We train on this, as I spoke about earlier. When officers arrive on the scene, they immediately go in, which we did in this case, stop the threat, stop the killing, find the killer. That's how we train. And that's exactly what we did today. There's no waiting. There's no coordination of who's in charge. Everyone knows exactly what to do.
I think this is a private school. It's a private Christian school, I believe.
We train on this constantly. Our commanders, including the fire chief and I, was in a commander's training less than 2 weeks ago, going over this exact same scenario for another fictional location. And so all of that came into play today, and our officers performed extremely well based on their training and based on the expectations that they know exactly what to do. Stop the threat, stop the killing, find the threat.
Thank you, Paul. I think the questions have been asked, and we're straying a little far from what's most important at this point in time, and that is the victims and their families. I have 3 things to add. First of all, there is a lot that our community can and will do in the coming days to support the victims and their families, and we will have more information at future briefings. If anyone, and I would urge you all to include this in your stories, if anyone needs mental health support as a result of this incident and the coverage of it, I encourage them to reach out to 988 by phone or text and to get the mental health support that they need. It is incredibly important that we take care of our community in this very difficult time. We all have a role in preventing gun violence. Our entire community needs to be part of the solution here. There are many things that we can do, and we can have those conversations in coming days. But first and foremost, what needs to be the priority for all of us.
Last I heard, there was never a private school shooting. Yeah,
and
no,
it
it happens every now and then. It's just less likely.
At this point in time, the police department, the fire department, the city, the county will share additional information about the investigation as it becomes available. But I urge you all to help our community find resources to support their mental health, to find resources to support the victims and families at this time. Thank you all.
It'll be on cityofmadison.com. Me, Stephanie, and Cynthia will stick around and answer any other questions, but that's all.
Let me say just before I go, because the mayor mentioned that this was a whole of government response. It certainly was, and there's so many people that we want to thank. We cannot thank everyone, but it's also a whole of law enforcement response. Even though we are in different agencies, we all have the same training. And so I want to thank our partners with the FBI who are here with me today, partners with the ATF, Dane County Emergency Management. Of course, we already talked about our fire department. We've got calls from the Attorney General of the United States, Wisconsin State Patrol, our governor's office, State Patrol, Monona, as well as our sheriff's office. I know I may have left someone out, but thank you for how you responded. Professionally, quickly, and according to the way that we all trained, and it all came together to ensure that no other persons were hurt. Thank you.
10:57.
Yeah, so I will work on getting that information.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, it is, we got to do a little bit of propaganda, you know what I'm saying? But we'll look at the final tally, which is so crazy to say. And I'll also tune into CNN to see if they're covering it as well, to see if we can get a better update.
This was a whole of government response. It certainly was. And
they're finishing off the thing, but hold on. I live close to the school and already hearing from parents is because of anti-Christian propaganda. Do you think the right will run, considering it's rare? I mean, any argument in the immediate aftermath of yet another school shooting that hyper focuses on the background of the shooter, the mentality of the shooter, mental health, or potentially like the ideological reasons as to why they did this, which they will do, and Republicans do it all the time, even if the fucking shooter is a Republican, and in most cases it is. Any argument that does not obviously point to the real problem here, which is mass availability of guns, is a simple distraction.
Christian school, a private parochial Christian school with about 400 students, K through 12. Police just confirmed the 2 victims killed were a teacher and a teenage student. 6 other victims were injured, including 2 students who currently are believed to have life-threatening injuries. Police got the call about the shooting just before 11 a.m. local time in Madison, Wisconsin. We learned moments ago that someone at the school called 911 to report the active shooter. Police say the shooter, who was also dead, was a juvenile, was a student at the school. Madison's police chief, Sean Barnes, noted earlier today this tragic event coming just one
A teacher
week
and a teen
before the
student was
holidays.
killed in the shooting at Madison Abundant Life Christian
honest
School.
with
Two
you,
students are
I'm
suffering
feeling,
life-threatening injuries in critical
a little
condition.
dismayed now. So close to Christmas. Every child, every person in that building is a victim and will be a victim forever. And these types of trauma don't just go
6 other
away.
people are injured. 2 of the students are in critical
Today's
condition with
deadly
life-threatening
shooting
injuries. The
in
other 4
Wisconsin
students were taken to an
comes
area
2
hospital and are
days
expected to
after
survive.
the nation marked the anniversary of a different
At this
school
time,
shooting,
3 people are deceased. During the media
2012
briefing
Sandy
earlier this
Hook
afternoon, it was
massacre in Newtown,
erroneously...
Connecticut, which-
Wait, they're saying... During the media briefing earlier this afternoon, it was erroneously shared. 5 were deceased. Again, 3 people are deceased. 9 in total were injured, including 3 deceased. I believe 2 are in critical
this year
condition.
surpassing last year's total by just 1. 2024 has now seen the most school shootings in a single year since CNN began keeping track of this horrific statistic in 2008. Let's get right to CNN's Shimon Prokopez and John Miller and Whitney Wild, who is in Madison. And Whitney, you're at the press conference. You just asked a question to Chief Sean Barnes on whether the suspect was known to have had any other prior run-ins with the law. What did he say?
He said that the suspect was not known to law enforcement. I also asked if the school had had any threats, and he said they were really little surface things, 911 calls, hang-ups, things like that, but there wasn't anything that had indicated that violence would happen at that school, especially that violence would happen today. Jake, we did learn a little bit more. What we know is that someone from the school called reporting an active shooter, which the police chief says initiates a very specific protocol. The chief described an immediate response from law enforcement, although they did not say exactly what time they made entry. What we know is that that call came in at 10:57. I and other reporters here asked exactly what time did law enforcement make their way into that school. We are still waiting on that detail. Law enforcement is saying very little about the shooter other than to say it was a teenager at the school, Jake. They did not say the age of the shooter. They did not say the shooter's gender. They did say that that shooter had a handgun, and we know from CNN's Josh Campbell that that was a 9mm pistol, a very common type of handgun, very common type of handgun for gun violence. Further, Jake, we learned that this area was confined to one space, although the chief did not know if it was confined to a hallway or a classroom. Those are still details that we're waiting on. Jake, at this point, the chief does not believe that they had a school resource officer. That would have come from the city. It would have been one of his officers. He said he's not aware of that. Further, Jake, and this is something that we learned earlier today, but as well, finalizing this, that when law enforcement finally made entry, Jake, what they saw was that the shooter had died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There are so many questions. The foremost, of course, Jake, is why. Here's what the chief said.
Many of you have asked me about the why of this. Why did this happen?
Wait, what? See, the liberals want you to believe we need to control our AR-15s. This young man just done shot up the school with a handgun, brother.
But I will tell
yeah,
you,
you're
our
right.
detectives are working hard. And
You're right, man. You're right. No gun control at all. Okay? No gun control whatsoever. You're right.
not only in this community, but in other communities around our country.
Jake, what we know is that the 2 other people who died, one was a teacher, one was a teenage student. At this point, there are 6 people who are in critical condition. The chief described that with life-threatening injuries. 4 other students have non-life-threatening injuries, Jake. Many more questions to answer here. We expect to get an update later this evening, Jake.
Isn't this embarrassing for America?
The police chief,
Dude, Americans have no
officers
concept of shame. You can't
to,
shame people who are shameless. What do you mean? You think, like, broadly you can shame America or Americans? No, they don't give a fuck.
When they arrived?
Yes, that is the case. They believe that the shooter shot themselves. And I don't want to necessarily at this point, Jake, I don't think we're identifying the gender of the shooter. There are some questions. So we can't identify the shooter yet as male or female, as we heard from the police chief there. But yes, they do believe that the shooter took their own life. And it was in the process of their response. They responded, they got the call around 10:57 a.m. and then within 15 minutes we heard this incredible tell from the fire chief there of how within 15 minutes they had transported everyone from the scene to the hospital, including the shooter. The shooter was still alive, when emergency officials responded to the scene, and then they even removed that person, and they were able to get them some treatment, but they died at the hospital. But the key here, obviously, Jake, is they're still working through trying to identify exactly the shooter.
And John Miller, a law enforcement source, says a 9mm pistol was used in the shooting. Tell us about that weapon.
Well, the typical 9mm pistol is a semi-automatic handgun. Most 9mm pistols can have a magazine that takes up to 14 rounds, which means if you have one in the chamber, that's 15 rounds. So this is a small, compact weapon, relatively easy to conceal, and one that gives you a large capacity of rounds to fire, which in a case like this, of course, just increases the damage, the danger, the impact. One of the things that we have learned throughout the terrible and repetitive history of mass shootings and school shootings, but particularly with school shootings, is that most guns come from the home. You know, when we ask questions like, how did this child in every place from Uvalde to other places, you know, obtain these weapons, it comes from the home in most cases. And with a teenager, this is one of the reasons that we hear the chief saying we're obtaining search warrants. When they go to search that home, they're going to be looking for the phone, the computer, the laptop, the things where they may find the building blocks, the planning, writings about what led to this shooting to establish motive, any notes or communiques left behind where maybe the shooter put forth motive. But they're also going to be looking for, are there guns in the home? Are the guns accounted for? Is
Police
this one of
shooting,
those
school
guns?
shootings are a white
Is
supremacy
one not
problem, not a gun
accounted
problem.
for?
It
Are there
absolutely
boxes,
is a gun
ammunition,
problem.
and
What are
so
you
on?
talking about?
Because they're going to want to obviously find out where this weapon came from.
You think other countries don't have white supremacy baked into their core identity? Why the fuck don't they have mass shootings in other countries, school shootings in other countries? Every single thing that you can point to in the United States of America, all of the other components that you can point to, isolate, and identify exist in virtually every other country on the planet. Okay? The one thing that does not exist in other countries is the ready availability of guns, the number of guns in circulation, and the ease of access to weapons. That's it. I mean, not in the same way that the U.S. has white supremacy, just saying. That's fucking delusional and also ridiculous. Okay? What are we doing? Oh my God, every single time, dude. This community has learned nothing from the past election cycle and the loss of the election cycle and how, like, staying on message is supposed to look like. That's crazy. Yeah, it's the white supremacy. Let's look at Madison, Wisconsin demographics in 2024. 7%, half the percentage. Madison, Wisconsin is 74% white. Is white people killing other white people? Not to say that there aren't fucking Nazis in Madison, Wisconsin, but the notion that white supremacy was a primary factor here is so crazy. Like, what are you talking about? You don't know any of that. You don't know what the shooter's ideology is at all. We don't know anything yet. And you're trying to slap on like white supremacy as a reason for this. Yeah, it's white on white violence. I just like, even if this is straight up a neo-Nazi that did the shooting, it doesn't matter. Okay? It could be a straight up neo-Nazi that did the shooting and said, I'm doing this for being a neo-Nazi. Guns are still guns, and their readily available nature of guns. Having more guns in circulation than there are people in this country is absolutely what makes it easier for these sorts of mass shootings to happen in a country where there are a shit ton of white supremacists and whatnot. It still doesn't matter, though. There are plenty of other countries where there's like active neo-Nazi movements. There are plenty of other countries where fascists have actually gotten control of governments. Look at Italy. Look at Germany. And yet they don't have the same number of mass shootings or school shootings that we have. That's it. Europeans literally look at us and go, what the fuck is going on? This is the one issue that every European social democrat would agree on, regardless of their other, ideological differences with me. They literally look to this and go, what the fuck is happening in America? Whenever I cover this shit. Are you a gun control supporter? No judgment. I just don't think I've ever heard your thoughts on it. Yes. Of course, I'm a gun control supporter. What kind of crazy question is that? Yes, I believe in good governance. Of course. The only time I can think of a similar thing occurring in Europe would be back in 2011 when a neo-Nazi killed a bunch of kids at a summer camp. That's the only time I can think of that mirrors America's mass shooting epidemic. Yeah. Right-wingers in a country outside of the U.S. look at our gun violence with the same eyes as left-wingers. Exactly. Switzerland is the only country in the European continent that has a higher gun ownership per capita rating than the rest of the nations. And yet, because of that reality, they still have more gun violence per capita than other countries. And having said that, it is still infinitely more limited. It's marginally higher than other countries in Europe. Having said that, however, it's nowhere near the gun violence per capita metric in the United States of America. So, I mean, it's a perfect example that it's a perfect demonstration that yes. Anyway, let's just watch President-elect Trump delivering remarks to the press. Is he talking about this gun violence or what?
Investors in the world, and we've just concluded a very productive meeting. And today, I'm thrilled to announce that SoftBank will be investing $100 billion in America, creating 100,000 American jobs at a minimum. And he's doing this because he feels very optimistic about our country since the election. And many other people are also coming in with tremendous amounts of money. You probably noticed that a poll was just taken. Its business is literally in 39 years, there's been nothing like it. It's been the biggest increase. Small business owners gave it a 41% jump. It's the biggest jump that we've had in 39 years. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And it's just, they're very optimistic. This historic investment is a monumental demonstration of confidence in...
Never mind. He's not talking about this. Okay. He's so pissed he won. He doesn't want to be talking about this dumb shit. Yeah, there's TikTok news as well. It's baked into our society. It's not that gun control is radical, but Americans are insecure when it comes to trusting individuals, i.e. need for self-defense, because I would kill to get ahead and so will they. Socialist clothing company founder creating disturbing most wanted CEOs playing cards in the wake of United Healthcare shooting. Socialist clothing company? What is this? The founder of a socialist apparel brand who was called online for the death of corporate executives was planning to sell a deck of cards of the most wanted CEOs, complete with names and faces decorated with illustrations of gun range targets. He was inspired by the most wanted Iraqi playing card decks, famously distributed in the U.S. and coalition forces. James Haar? Who cares, man? Free speech, baby. Alex Jones of the left. We're never getting gun regulation. There has to be another way. Alex Jones of the left, lol. Yeah. I'm an Alex Jonesian type of person because I believe that in spite of the many hurdles that, you know, I will never cease to advocate for what I believe is correct. And in this circumstance, it's actually what I believe is correct is has been implemented in so many other countries.
Thing like this where a female student comes in and you wouldn't have even put two eyes on the situation beforehand.
And Marisa, in terms of campus safety and preventing...
Alex Jones on the left be like, these school shootings are real and we should implement common sense gun safety regulations to, you know, limit the number of school shootings that do happen in the country, that it happens in increasing frequency.
What we see are common alarming
Do you
behaviors
hear
beforehand.
yourselves?
And I'll tell you kind of the shorthand version of this is that the vast majority of students who carry out school shootings are students who are in crisis. They have problems they feel like they can't solve another way. They look to violence as a solution. Oftentimes, they either plan to kill themselves at the end or they're hoping for a suicide by cop. They're hoping responding law enforcement will kill them in the process because they don't want to live anymore. We have a lot of tools that can help someone who's at that point of desperation and doesn't know what to do, doesn't feel like they can cope with life any longer. And so what schools, like Steve was talking about, the Students of Concern Committee, Behavioral Threat Assessment Committees, these are eyes and ears within the schools and often with information that come from the student population because they are the first ones to likely hear or know if a fellow student is in crisis. They can take a look at what's going on for this student, talk with the student directly. Are you thinking about engaging in violence? Are you planning to do so? Why? What problem are you trying to solve? And then help that student solve the problem through nonviolent means. We see so many of these students engage them with the
Leftist Alex Jones be like harassing politicians that are responsible for so much violence in American society instead of the parents of dead children in the aftermath of a school shooting.
Showing pictures of weapons. Those are all behaviors that if they get to adults in school, the adults, especially when they have threat assessment training, can look further and say, what's going on with this student? How can we figure out are they considering violence? Are they feeling desperate? Are they suicidal? And how can we help stabilize that person and put them on a better path?
All right, Marisa and Steve, thanks to both of you. Really appreciate it. Coming up 1 week before Christmas, a young student has been killed. A teacher has been killed. How will Madison, Wisconsin even begin to deal with this horrific day? An area leader will join us next.
Dude, this is wild stuff. I swear. It's always like, it's just so commonplace. It's just so commonplace at this point where it's like we have streamlined the coverage. We have streamlined the coverage immediately. First of all, never let a good crisis go to waste. Okay, that's number one. What do I mean by this? Now we have like additional industries tasked with, designed with the purpose of extracting some kind of profit out of tragedies like this, where we now have like, gun violence, school shooting, gun violence related trauma experts. You know what I mean? You have like businesses dedicated to hardening schools because they're soft targets as it stands currently. It's kind of crazy. Like the one thing that keeps spinning is the wheels of capital. No matter what happens, there's like endless tragedies, and yet we always seemingly find a reasonable market solution. And that doesn't mean that we're actually eliminating the problem. It's never about eliminating the problem. It's about trying to triage and I guess like stop the bleeding by, making more money. Yeah, one man's tragedy is another man's opportunity. Owning guns puts people in your home at greater risk of being killed. New study shows millions of Americans may have already asked themselves these questions or versions of them, especially in the wake of horrific mass shootings like those in Buffalo and Uvalde. Record-breaking spikes in gun sales over the last 2 years, alongside surveys indicating that self-protection continues to be the dominant reason for buying guns, underscore a widely held belief that gun in the home has security benefits. A new study from our research team recently published in the Annals of Internal Medicine shows no such benefits. We found the opposite. People living in homes with guns face substantially higher risk of being fatally assaulted. Mass shootings are the most visible form of gun violence in America, but they account for a small fraction of fatal shootings. 100% correct. It's the tip of the iceberg. Most of these deaths are lesser known, private tragedies that occur in homes and on the streets. We studied 18 million adults living in California. Nearly 2,300 of them that died by homicide over the 12 years of the study. Thanks to California's historical archive of firearm transactions, we can identify who in this enormous population personally owned guns and who lived with gun owners. The study's goals was to see whether homicides were more or less likely to occur in homes with handguns. Sorry, but if you spam by this before, apparently shooter was a rad fam that wanted to kill men. This is only from Twitter, but seems credible. No, it doesn't seem credible. You just said it's only from Twitter. We don't know anything yet. While that could be the case, it's fucking ridiculous to go, I saw something on Twitter and now I'm running with it. Seems credible. What the hell? First of all, statistically speaking, if we're going to go by, this is pure speculation. But if we're going to go by who the common perpetrators of gun violence and school shootings are, is most likely a cisgender, heterosexual, white dude. Okay? It doesn't even fucking matter in this situation, and it doesn't matter in any situation. Like, people's ideological proclivities are, sure, informative. Okay? They're instructive, but what you fail to comprehend, what you fail to consider is that other nations have similar tendencies. They just don't have the means of enacting this level of violence. And the reason why they don't have the means of enacting this level of violence is simple. It's because they do not have guns. I'd be shocked if it was actually a woman that did this mass shooting, because that would not be statistically the norm. It would be outside of the norm. Having said that, I reiterate my position in the aftermath of the Nashville school shooting where the shooter was trans. That is the most American thing. Do you understand? It's the most American thing. Inevitably, it was going to be a woman that does a mass shooting or a school shooting. Inevitably, it was going to be a trans person that was going to do a school shooting or a mass shooting. That's just the reality of America. Oh, CNN confirmed the shooter is a female. Do you understand what I'm saying? I said this exact same thing in the aftermath of the Nashville school shooting where the shooter was a trans person. It literally does not matter. Bro, we have like 70-year-old Asian men doing mass shootings. Do you know how fucking statistically unlikely that shit is in general? That's just America, baby.
We heard there is not a, or was not a school resource officer at the school. It's obviously a private school. And I think that public schools in Madison might have school resource officers, but I'm not sure. Do they? And do you think more police resources should be deployed to all schools in Madison, not just public?
Yeah, I don't care about the statistical relevance either, Chatter, for the record.
And it's up to every school district whether they decide whether to have school resource officers
I'm
or
saying
not.
that like it doesn't matter what the shooter is. I'm saying that before I knew what the shooter's background was.
What I've been hearing is just the complete and utter devastation of what this means to those students, those parents, those loved ones, family members, and everybody that goes to not only those school, but
why should my rights be restricted when it only addresses a symptom, not the problem?
It impacts more than just that neighborhood. You have people all over the county.
Dog, you know this argument that you're making, why should my rights be restricted argument you're making can be made for any rule, any rule, any restriction, any regulation. You understand that, right? You don't have a right to own a gun. That is ridiculous. The assertion that you have some God-given right to own a weapon is already a faulty premise to start at, okay? What you're quite literally, like, you sound like an NRA lobbyist, card-carrying leftist in the chat, talking like the dumbest fucking sovereign citizen you ever encountered.
Tragedy. Also had a bit of the news-making remarks from President-elect Trump, commenting on his conversations with world leaders, the outgoing administration, and his cabinet picks and more. Stay with us.
Listen to Chasing Life with me,
anyway,
Dr. Sanjay.
Chatter sounds like an NRA shill. How will you make sure gun control doesn't just concentrate gun ownership in the hands of the right? What do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, feds have been in the Reddit board trying to make leftists like guns, like Gretchen. Wait, what? I mean, leftists do already like guns. American leftists do. American leftists are crazy. Americans are crazy. It's just like one of those issues where, you know how like even right-wingers in other countries are not so brain broken as to think like every person should own a gun. America is the exact opposite. Left wingers, just like right wingers, love their guns. Okay. It's so funny to be like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, why are my rights being infringed on? Because this addresses a symptom and not the root cause of the problem. First of all, it is the root cause of the problem. Anyone that tells you that guns are not the root cause of gun violence as a problem is wrong. Secondly, every fucking rule and restriction technically infringes on your liberties to do something stupid. Here are people in the 80s reacting to DUI laws.
Drinking and driving here is viewed by some as downright undemocratic.
It's kind of getting common when a fella can't put in a hard day's work, put in 11, 12 hours a day, and then get in your truck and at least drink 1 or 2 beers.
They're making it laws where you can't drink when you want to. You have to wear a seatbelt when you're driving. And pretty soon we're going to be calm this country.
It's so crazy. It's just nutty. I don't know. As a Wisconsinite, I still agree with them in that video. No, I know. Yeah, what about my rights to drink and drive as a woman? Previous studies have probed that question with virtually all finding higher homicide rates in homes with guns, but our study had 3 novel features. First, rather than calculating the household as a whole, as the prior research has done, we focused on household members who live with a handgun owners, but weren't themselves owners. In other words, we tackled a secondhand risk of firearm ownership. Surprisingly little is known about the secondhand risk of a gun in the home. Imagine being able to separate the risk of smoking to smokers and the risk of environmental tobacco smoke for everyone else. That, unfortunately, is about where gun violence research stands today, at least partly because of the data needed to conduct such studies do not exist. California's archive is unique. You know what else California is unique on? Despite being a fucking massive state and having a bunch of like weird loopholes as well, or weird laws, like patchwork of laws that make it less fun to own a gun and more annoying to own a gun, for example. All of those problems have led to one thing, and that is California's gun violence rates are lower than the national average. Shocking. California's gun violence rates are lower than the national average. So is New York's gun violence rates. As a matter of fact, so is Illinois' gun violence rates, despite the fact that Chicago's right there. And even then, Chicago, most of the guns in Chicago are not coming in from Illinois anyway. It's actually coming from neighboring states that you could easily go to and get guns from. Gun violence statistic map. Guys, you're about to find out something incredibly shocking. States where there are less restrictions on access to guns have significantly higher gun violence rates. Okay? The one exception to this rule is Washington, D.C. And even then, it's usually proximity to other states where you can get guns with ease. You know this fucking map. You've seen this fucking map. I've shown this map many times over. D.C. is the one exception to the rule. Outside of that, virtually every single state, Mississippi, Louisiana, New Mexico, Alabama, Missouri, Montana, Alaska, Arkansas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Wyoming. I've skipped D.C. Wyoming, Arizona, Oklahoma, Georgia, Nevada, Kentucky, Indiana, Colorado, Idaho, Kansas, North Carolina, North Dakota, West Virginia, South Dakota, Ohio, Texas, Michigan, Virginia. Poverty also has to do with it, certainly. Do we know how socioeconomic status may confound these statistics? Yes, poverty plays a major role in this. Of course it does. It plays a major role in everything. But it's kind of like this. Americans used to say, why should I get vaccinated? That's just for obese people that could die from COVID. In a country where there is a 60% obesity metric, that means most Americans are fucking obese. They need to get vaccinated. You can't fantasize about a country that we are not. You have to write rules and restrictions and regulations about a country that we are. Okay? Fuck. Only poor people do gun violence in a country where most of us live paycheck to paycheck. I know. That's the other scary part of this dynamic as well. Also, how are you going to restrict it? You're going to just make only rich people have guns? That's crazy. I've noticed so many people trying to redistribute the blame. It's guns people. Guns are the common denominator. I know. And there are so many studies that point to this. It's one of those things that frequently loops back to the same problem that I constantly yell about. Okay? It is a lack of interest in identifying, critically thinking about anything, identifying what the actual problem is, looking at the common denominator, isolating it, and trying to tackle the problem head on. And when you don't actually do that, you just end up believing in a whole bunch of different conspiratorial things. What? You already forget the rich guy that shot a CEO? What? Oh, I'm not saying rich people don't have a... what are you talking about? I'm not even arguing against this. Like, you're literally arguing for a position that I do not hold. I'm done. I'm not doing that. It's a self-propagating issue, though. I only own a gun because I feel like so many insane right-wingers around me are going to get violent. I know. It's great. Everybody has a gun. Abundant Life Christian school officials asked for prayers on Facebook after the fucking shooting. It's like saying Christianity caused this problem because it was a fucking private Christian school. You know what I mean? I would never make that argument. The following list of the shooter are all anime accounts. We don't even... How have people found the shooter's account yet? The name has not been released. I believe CNN actually... Oh my God, dude, stop. Oh, CNN accidentally said she... Accidentally? What? They wrote a manifesto on Google Doc but forgot to give read access to it? Wait, what? I don't think this is the person. I think... How do you know this is the person? Yeah, just stop speculating on who the shooter is. Until the media confirms who the person is. The only confirmation that has come so far is that the Madison school shooter was a female, law enforcement official says. The suspect, who was a teenage student at the school, is also dead. No names have been released so far. And here's a great example of like people running with what they think is happening because they saw it online. You literally ran with faulty information, and in the process of running with faulty information, you ended up sending me the account of a dude who posted some fucking memes, like 4chan ass memes. I repeat what I said when the Nashville school shooting happened. It literally doesn't matter. While the overwhelming majority of shooters are white men, for the most part, it still does not change the dynamic. It's America. Inevitably, people from every kind of background will probably engage in a fucking mass shooting. And the reason for that is because the United States of America is an incredibly violent culture, has an incredibly violent culture, but more importantly than that, no access to fucking mental health. But more importantly than that, last but not least, perhaps the most significant, shit ton of weapons readily available. Okay? It's happened before too. Female mass shooters are very rare, but it has happened in the past. The fuck is up with your community stream? What do you mean? What? Here's what Tom Homan, the upcoming fucking mass deporter in chief, is saying on Fox News. This is a parody account, or like not his real account, but this is what he says on Fox News, like Tom Homan.
Also, as President Trump is committed, we're going to deputize every U.S. citizen in this country to help us find 340,000 missing children, because we need the public's help on this. Every mom and dad knows what it's like. They have a gut feeling when they see.
This will be great. Yeah. No, this will definitely be good. I can't foresee this being massively consequential and horrifying. Deputizing every fucking psycho, every armed psycho who now believes that like there is a stolen child every time they see like a brown person with a kid. Deputizing the armed population. Why don't we address the mental health, the feelings of isolation, the lack of free public spaces, and economic problems? Great question, chatter, who keeps saying, why should my rights be restricted when it only addresses a symptom, not the problem? Okay. Great question from the chatter, the NRA lobbyist in the chat that is advocating for less gun control or no gun control, while simultaneously saying, well, why don't we just advocate? Why don't we fix all the other problems? I don't disagree with you. I think we should fix all those other problems as well, which is why I advocate for those other problems every fucking day of the week, including today. The issue here is, even if you were to solve many of these issues, there would still be a shit ton of gun violence, a shit ton more gun violence in the United States of America. Okay? Want to know why? Including suicides, for example. You want to know why? Because there's a shit ton of guns. That's it. It's that simple. It's so funny when people go, oh, dude, why don't we address the underlying material problems? Yeah, really? That's going to stop your 5-year-old from fucking shooting you in the dick? Bro, this country is so insane with gun violence. Dogs have killed their owners. Okay? Dogs. How do you materially solve that problem? We have such an insane country with so much readily available weaponry that we've had. This is a country where a dog has killed their owner with a gun in the car. How do you solve that? What kind of mental health complications exist when your 5-year-old picks up your gun and shoots you in the fucking head with it? They don't know what the fuck they're doing. It's ridiculous. And the irony here is that, once again, other countries with comparable rates of mental health problems, other countries with comparable rates of poverty, literally do not have the same level of gun violence. It's that simple. One must ask the question, why? They haven't solved those issues better than America, and yet they still have virtually no gun violence in comparison to the United States of America. Yeah. Toddler accidentally shoots mom, 22 dead while playing, with mom's 22, with mom who is 22 years old, dead while playing with unsecured gun, boyfriend arrested. Now, before you say, no true Scotsman, you're not going to solve all of these problems with gun control or whatever, but like, mom was 22 years old. Yes, is a horribly written fucking article title. How do we know it's an accident? I say arrest the kid. What about other countries of similar gun ownership? What? There is no country on this planet with, like, I believe the exception of Yemen, that has a similar rate of gun ownership. And even Yemen does not come near the American rate of gun ownership. There is no country on this planet that has comparable rate of gun ownership. Like, people talk about I talked about Switzerland earlier. Not even remotely close. No other country comes near that. Look, yeah, Falkland Islands. And then number 3 is Yemen. And in every other country, whether it be Serbia, Montenegro, Canada, Uruguay, Cyprus, Finland, Switzerland, whatever, they all have gun control. No other country has nearly the readily available firearms rating, like the firearms availability per capita rating. Okay? No other country has anywhere near the lack of gun safety, gun violence prevention measures that America demonstrates. It is fucking crazy. Ugh. America is two things, gun and burger. Okay, that's it. America only has two speeds, gun and burger, sometimes burger gun. Don't touch either of those things, please. Only one party is fighting against gun violence, and it's the Morena party. Cartels get their guns from the U.S. Yeah, I know. I almost want to watch Bowling for Columbine as well, which is yet another Michael Moore documentary of a problem that is ever present and has never gone away, and also simultaneously only gotten worse. Bowling for Columbine is a 2002 documentary written, produced, and directed and narrated by Michael Moore. Moore looks at the Columbine High School massacre in 1999 and other acts of gun violence. He focused on the background and environment in which the massacre took place and some common public opinions and assumptions about related issues. Looks at the nature of violence in the United States and American violence abroad. It's crazy because since then, things have gotten dramatically worse. Just like since Sicko, the situation has gotten dramatically worse. Yeah, my first ever ban happened because I watched pieces of Bowling for Columbine. It was actually not necessarily Bowling for Columbine and gun violence that got me banned. It was the segment where American violence in Latin American countries that he talked about, that he showed, that got me banned. It's kind of crazy to think that the problems still fucking very much persist. Is there a way to do I'm trying to figure out if there's captioning and whatnot. What is this?
All of the CEOs out there being like, I'm so scared. Violence is not the answer. Gen Z is really sitting here like, oh my God, y'all really raised the school shooter generation and now you're asking us for sympathy. You normalize gun violence to the point where we take days to weeks.
Yeah, I said that. I've said this as well. Americans are hyper desensitized to violence, specifically gun violence. And then they expect people to just like, doors open. The policies you support would mean more Americans living. What about all other living things? What? In case you want to watch later, fantastic video about how Americans became such gun-loving perverts. Yeah, I feel like people have brought this channel up before, Horses. I will watch this actually.
All Horses videos are available ad-free, uncensored, and 1 week early on Patreon. Patrons also get exclusive videos and 20% off the Horses store. Check it out at patreon.com/horsespt. Compared to similar countries, America is a violent place. In America, people die violent deaths at a much higher rate than in other rich capitalist countries. This violence has expressed itself in a number of ways throughout history, but guns are currently and have always been part of the American language of violence. This video is not intended to prescribe some solution for American gun violence. I will not advocate for gun rights or for gun control in this essay. Instead, this video will identify in an objective way why America seems to have a genetic, unending, and unstoppable fondness for firearms. First thing we should determine is simple. Do Americans actually love guns? The answer here is complicated. According to the Pew Research Center, only 32% of Americans say they actually own a gun. This stat alone would indicate that perhaps Americans don't actually love guns as much as we may believe. But when we dig further into these statistics, we get a more comprehensive version of the truth. Despite a statistical ambivalence about gun ownership, Americans have more guns per capita than any other country in the world by a large margin. Per 100 residents, America has about 120 guns. The next highest country is Yemen with about 53. So, within the context of the globe, yes, we can say that Americans relatively do love guns. The majority of Americans do believe that gun ownership is a right. Depending on whose statistics you look to, this support ranges from just over 50% to over 70%. Loving guns isn't inherently bad, but among high-income countries, America has the 7th highest rate of gun homicides. The countries that are ahead of America, though, are small nations with whom America probably can't be compared. Panama, the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, to name a few. Notably, two of the countries that America trails are American territories, Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. When we compare American homicide by gun rates with our global peers, America is an outlier. Among high-income countries with populations over 10 million, America is first with 4.52 gun homicides per 100,000 people. Saudi Arabia is a distant second. Canada has 0.62. The UK has 0.01. All of this put together can lead to a reasonable and objective conclusion. America leads the world by some margin in gun violence. Still, Americans love guns. So here we arrive at the core of this video. Why? Data can provide us with a contemporary but perhaps shallow answer to this question. Recent statistics show that 67% of gun owners have a gun for protection, 38% for hunting, 30% for sport shooting, 13% as part of a gun collection, and 8% for their job. On an individual level, these are reasonable justifications, but this data doesn't really tell us how or why guns have become so ingrained in American culture. The French have wine, Canadians have hockey, in much the same way Americans have guns. Why is this? Perhaps unsurprisingly, America's affinity for guns started a long time ago. When early colonists arrived in North America, they found Native Americans who were no strangers to violent conflict. However, these colonists brought with them a technology that would make conquering the New World fairly straightforward. That technology was...
This is the Neo-Confucianism. We must go back to Neo-Confucianism of America. Okay? Which is, I mean, it's great. I like it so far. I like it a lot so far. Once again, the channel is called Horses. And the video is called Why America, in parentheses, Still Loves Guns.
Was, of course, the rifle. The colonists realized their rifles gave them an immense advantage over the native people, so colonial leaders mandated gun ownership. In 1658, Virginia required that, quote, every man able to bear arms have in his house a fixed gun. Around this time, Plymouth County also instated a similar law requiring every male to own a gun. This law would shortly thereafter be extended to the entirety of Massachusetts. At the time, these weapons were primarily intended to attack and defend against Native Americans. In his book, The Barbarous Years, historian Bernard Bailyn notes that there was one group, Europeans, using violence to assert its will over another group, Native Americans. This basically set the precedent that violence, specifically gun violence, was a legitimate method of settling disputes and enacting one's own will in America. And sure enough, colonists began settling their own disputes with violence. Rates of European on European violence rose during this period. So perhaps it could even be an understatement to say that America was founded on violence. America was from its very beginning steeped in gun violence. Certainly conquering land is different than shooting up a school, but the point remains. Since Europeans arrived, America has had violence through the use of firearms. As America moved into the Revolutionary War, we see the evolution of America's gun culture. We shouldn't go so far as to say the Revolutionary War happened over the right to own guns. The British made some haphazard attempts at confiscating American guns, but this was not the driving force of the revolution. In reality, the revolution came from issues over taxes and representation in British government. But in any case, we won the Revolutionary War by using guns. Without firearms, today there would likely be no United States of America. This is an important thing to remember as we discuss the country's ongoing cultural love for guns. Following the war, early colonists still had fresh memories of British troops and their treatment of American citizens. With this in mind, America and its leaders were not too keen on the idea of a standing American army. Quite the opposite. The idea of a national army was seen as antithetical to American liberty. However, the Founding Fathers did recognize that some type of military might would be necessary to keep the peace. So they set out to protect the private citizens' rights to organizing militias. Gun ownership is pointedly discussed within America's Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Both gun rights and gun control activists often claim that the Second Amendment is written in clear language. Both sides will proclaim that this amendment clearly supports their own argument. Indeed, when we examine this amendment, things can become confusing quite quickly. First of all, we have simple grammatical syntax. The English language has changed since this was written. Today, the sentence is difficult to parse. If we examine it only in form, as purely a grammatical exercise, the Second Amendment is difficult to understand. What do all of these commas mean? What exactly shouldn't be infringed? The militia or the guns themselves? To the modern reader,
You might think that this is fucking boring. Okay. And I'm hearing some dumbasses in the chat saying similar things. But it is objectively important to understand how we arrived at this interpretation. So yes, unfortunately, language does play a very important role here. Every dumbass American points to the Second Amendment, whether in favor or against. I hope that he will talk about the interpretation of the Second Amendment changing throughout time as well, because it's something that I routinely point to. My story about American guns, like American gun violence and American gun culture and its evolution throughout time, my hypothesis doesn't start in the inception of the Second Amendment, but instead, it starts with the Vietnam War. The way I interpret the situation is that in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, there was a surplus of weapons of war, and these, capitalist gun manufacturers wanted to find a new market for them. They wanted to dump their surplus because waging war with these small arms was not enough. And it was the AR-15, the inception of the AR-15 was a fantastic invention because it wasn't just a gun. It was also a gun with a lot of specs, a lot of customization options. So it created massive secondary market opportunities as well. I think that this plays a big role in how the AR-15 became the most popular weapon, why it became the most popular weapon, and how the Second Amendment interpretation changed throughout time alongside this.
Second Amendment is not written very clearly. After all, if it was, there certainly wouldn't be so much debate about it. The meanings of words have also changed in ways that can enhance arguments for either side of the issue. Take the word regulated. Pulitzer Prize-winning constitutional scholar Jack Rakove says that in the 18th century, regulated did not mean subjected to laws or government restrictions. Rather, it meant that the militia would be armed, organized, and properly effective. So we could take this interpretation to mean the Second Amendment does not endorse government regulation of firearms. But then there's the phrase bear arms. Saul Cornell is another leading constitutional scholar who is considered one of the foremost authorities on Revolutionary-era legal thinking. Cornell has indicated that the right to bear arms had almost nothing to do with personal self-defense in revolutionary America. At the time, firearms were not considered tools for self-defense. They were military objects. Edged weapons and blunt objects were more in line with the idea of self-defense. To use a gun for defending oneself would have been like using a hatchet to cut vegetables. It would work, but the idea was just kind of outlandish. So this interpretation seems to indicate that the Second Amendment doesn't protect the right to gun ownership. Rakove and Cornell are both equally esteemed and qualified constitutional scholars, and each of them can lead us down different paths with the Second Amendment. These are just two examples, but there are endless more. Modern America has not been able to reach a conclusion on the Second Amendment because a lot of intelligent, qualified individuals have wildly differing interpretations of the text. Even the federal interpretation of the Second Amendment has swung wildly throughout time. For decades and decades, courts agreed that the Second Amendment did not protect individual rights to gun ownership. Rather, early Americans read the Second Amendment as protecting the existence of militias. However, in 2008, Supreme Court justices declared that the Second Amendment does in fact protect the right to individual gun ownership. Even still, this decision came with its fair share of conditions. Justice Antonin Scalia noted that firearms were subject to restrictions and regulations. The point of all of this is not to come to a conclusion on constitutional law. There are a lot of other Second Amendment stones I have left unturned here, and that is intentional. It is not my desire to advocate for any particular reading of the amendment, but rather we can take all of this to understand two things. First, the Founding Fathers believed that people should be allowed to keep rifles at home. This is included in the Bill of Rights. Second, America has never really known what to do about this. The Second Amendment has continuously been interpreted and reinterpreted as the basis for wildly divergent opinions and pieces of legislation. as we move forward past the 18th century, America's gun culture truly begins to take shape. In the mid-19th century, guns were still not seen as instruments of violence. Instead, they were tools. They were more shovel than sword. This was perhaps in part because they just didn't work very well. These guns were clunky, unreliable, inaccurate, and generally troublesome tools. But then a young man named Samuel Colt got to work. Around this time, Texans were fighting against the Comanche tribe. More accurately, they were trying to kill off the Comanches entirely. After hearing a remarkable battle story from a Texan named Sam Walker, Colt realized that firearms could have some romance about them. They could be more than tools. Guns could have some emotional meaning. So Samuel Colt began a massive marketing campaign. He associated his guns with the so-perceived bravery of defending America against foreigners and Native Americans alike. Just as early colonists had, Colt framed violence as a premier strategy for settling disputes. Samuel Colt sent free merchandise to politicians. He circulated pamphlets. He hired a famous painter to depict scenes of Colt guns saving American lives. Other firearms manufacturers soon followed suit. They all focused their efforts on handguns, which could be produced quite cheaply in America. For a long time, guns had been prohibitively expensive. That was no longer the case. Manufacturers like Colt made cheaper and cheaper handguns. In 1850, a Colt revolver was $12. By the year 1900, a .22 caliber Colt could be had for 18 cents. The country also had fewer restrictions on firearms than Europe, which alone incentivized gun ownership. People could, so they would. These newer, smaller guns were also quite convenient. They were more reliable than past firearms and could be neatly tucked away into the belt line. Combine all of this with an effective marketing campaign, and firearms like the new Colts were immensely successful. These guns made it easier to kill people. Strangling or beating a person to death brought an immense amount of risk. You could get hit back. There's also a lot of thought that had to occur before, during, and after such an act. Rifles were too cumbersome and bulky to carry around on one's person. There were essentially barriers to entry as far as violence was concerned, but handheld revolvers and handguns broke these down entirely. Now within a second or two, you could kill a man without a whole lot of effort, psychological or physical. During the 14 years when these changes were happening, firearms ownership ballooned to 10 times what it had been at the turn of the century. This reality was occurring against an increasingly violent backdrop. As the country hurled itself towards a civil war, America was becoming more and more homicidal. With the proliferation of slavery, there arose a new group which Americans desired to control. Taking cues from their forefathers, slave owners and other Americans used widely available firearms to control African slaves. Homicide rates skyrocketed across the nation in a time that is often called the riot era. Alongside this, increasing industrialization was making American cities more bountiful and more populated. This surge in productivity required more labor. So immigrants began to pour into America's largest cities. They were met with rampant xenophobia, which often translated to violence. Some American political parties declared that these immigrants, Scottish, Irish, and German, would bring with them violence, and that increased immigration meant increased danger for Americans. All of this, the violence and the proliferation of firearms, just spread and spread. The American West became the Wild West as prospectors clashed with Native Americans.
It's so funny that at any point, this is why I say America's a proto-capitalist nation before people even understood what capitalism was. But at every single point throughout American history, the same through lines are right there. The same problems persist. The same issues are right there for every single person. Again and again and again. It's incredible. Even gun violence and its starting point still comes from the mass availability of guns and much the gun manufacturer, Colt, in that circumstance, made it a formative part of your identity. That issue still very much exists. Is at the heart of what I talk about with respect to commodity fetishization and how guns, a commodity, are treated not only as a cultural signifier. When you own a gun, you're a gun owner, but also a political movement. You're part of an in-group of like-minded individuals that make political choices and decisions specifically at the behest of protecting your hobby, your commodity.
So across the entire country in the late 1800s, American violence was again in its ascendancy. Gun violence had worked for the colonists. It had worked for the revolutionaries. So now it was working for post-Civil War Western prospectors, Southern Americans, and xenophobic urbanites. These conflicts all reflect an idea that guns should be used to settle disputes. It is this idea which is perhaps at the core of America's gun culture. So for decades, that was exactly what happened. In the 1900s, America just got more and more homicidal. In 1900, the homicide rate was roughly 1 per 100,000 people. By 1930, it was almost 10 per 100,000 people. Much of this was due to gun violence surrounding prohibition and organized crime. America was in a sort of Tommy gun era, and its impacts were devastating. And so, we come to the next major force in America's gun culture, the NRA. By the 20s, the NRA had already been around for some 50-odd years. The group was originally founded to increase marksmanship abilities. For decades.
Yeah. The NRA in its inception is actually created by North. It's created by a New York Times journalist. Okay? It originally starts because the well-armed, the heavily armed Confederate states are able to put up a strong defense against the law enforcement authority of the Union. So the goal is to basically teach people how to properly use guns if there's ever a necessity to use them again. Okay? That's what it originally started as. And I believe it was I believe it was started by a New York Times journalist, and like I think it was not a freed slave, but I think it was a black dude as well.
Decades, they mostly organized shooting competitions. But after the Great Depression, the NRA began to drift into the political sphere. Their goal, though, was...
But, okay, he doesn't bring it up. So in its inception, it was to train Northerners to be able to properly handle a firearm and learn how to shoot it. Then it became a hunting club. It was purely for sport. The NRA basically was a sporting institution, okay? And it is actually relatively recent in the history of the NRA where it became this like massively consequential, overtly powerful political operation that operates on the boundaries of the material interests and the for-profit interests of gun manufacturers, that actively harms the American legislative body with its influence.
Was not the loosening of restrictions. Often the opposite was true. In the early 20s, the NRA successfully pushed for increased firearms regulation, hoping to ensure that only respectable, serious individuals could own guns. President Roosevelt signed two pieces of legislation which regulated commercial firearms sales: the 1934 National Firearms Act and the 1938 Federal Firearms Act. These two acts imposed paid registration on some weapons and federal registration for gun dealers. They also prohibited felons from purchasing guns at all. The NRA convinced Congress to exclude handguns from this new legislation, but broadly supported the bills. In 1934, the NRA president said in a testimony to Congress, "I do not believe in the general promiscuous toting of guns. I think it should be sharply restricted and only under licenses." The NRA began to change, though, when a new wave of violence came to America. After the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., a wave of riots spread across Baltimore. There emerged an increasing level of anxiety and violence around the civil rights movement. Richard Nixon was elected president as a law and order candidate. One of his first moves was to militarize urban police forces with heavier weaponry. And so Nixon continued these traditions of guns and violence being used to control a disobedient group and to settle conflict in America. Gun violence went again on the upswing. Gun homicides increased sharply by 51%. Assaults using firearms rose even more by an astounding 84%. Guns were also becoming cheaper. Inexpensive handguns were being imported from overseas like never before. In 1955, 67,000 handguns were imported to the U.S. In 1968, that number increased to about 1 million. At this time, the NRA was still firmly on the side of gun control. In 1968, NRA President Harold Glasson said in a lecture, "Does the right to keep and bear arms mean that every individual has a right to carry a gun at all times, concealed or openly? Obviously not." This same year, the U.S. government passed the Gun Control Act of 1968, prompted by the assassination of President Kennedy. However, the conservative movement in America was beginning to change dramatically. Increasingly, conservatives saw any and all government regulation as inherently problematic. Conservatives placed more and more value on personal freedoms. People like Barry Goldwater, Jerry Falwell, and Howard Jarvis pushed legislation under this new anti-government sentiment. The NRA was a conservative organization, and so they too underwent a seismic shift, almost overnight. In the 1970s, a man named Harlan Carter was an increasingly vocal member of the NRA. He took a hardline stance, believing that no amount of firearms legislation was acceptable. When asked if violent criminals and the mentally ill should be allowed to own guns, Harlan replied that it was the, quote, price we pay for freedom. Harlan wrote a letter to NRA leadership imploring them to take his position, declaring that we can win it on a simple concept: no compromise, no gun legislation. In the mid-70s, Carter would go on to essentially lead a coup against NRA leadership. This resulted in him winning the position of executive vice president. Under Harlan's leadership, the NRA entered into an entirely new era. The new NRA spread a narrative that the US government had a secret plan to disarm all Americans. The gun, Carter said, was the sole tool for defeating this government oppression. Further, Carter's NRA leveraged rising crime rates and racial anxieties to rally support for gun rights. This was all a massive success. Membership in the NRA tripled under Carter from 1 million to 3.7 million. Carter hired a team of lobbyists and activists who racked up victories across the country. Several states under NRA guidance added the right to bear arms into their constitution.
It's so funny that you can sell Americans anything with white supremacy. You can sell Americans the idea that welfare is bad because black people use it. You can sell Americans the idea that you must rise up and bear arms by saying black people are going to kill you. You can also, ironically, sell Americans the idea that there needs to be gun control by also using black people. California is a fantastic example of this, where in the immediate aftermath of a Black Panther Party demonstrating an armed protest at the state capitol, Ronald Reagan came down with, what is it called? The Mulford Act, I believe. They immediately made it illegal to openly bear arms in public. So crazy.
The NRA repeatedly defeated efforts to increase gun control measures on a federal level. Even after Carter left his position in the 80s, the NRA continued to find political success. They raised $70 million for Republican House Leader Newt Gingrich, and they spread pro-gun messaging throughout important swing state elections. Near the turn of the century, the NRA capitalized on the unpopularity of Bill Clinton, tax increases, and failed government reform policies. However, as Senator Chris Murphy points out in his book, the NRA accomplished a lot after the year 2000, despite having very little actual power. NRA did not spend a lot of money compared to other lobbyists and super PACs. In 2012, NRA endorsed candidates only won 1 out of 7 elections. During this time, there was very little statistical electoral advantage to having the NRA on your side. Bizarrely, the NRA had become an effective political force without actually having much in the way of political capability. Murphy, a politician himself, notes the phenomenon of the squeaky wheel. While a small minority of Americans support everything the NRA advocates for, the NRA encourages that minority to be as loud as possible. This, of course, skews public perception, which can result in real legislative and electoral action. The NRA also has a remarkably strong brand. For a politician, the NRA endorsement broadcasts a lot more than gun rights. It's a conservative badge of honor. Whether or not the voting population agrees with the NRA on individual policy issues, a candidate earning their endorsement can be an important piece of the electoral puzzle. Culturally, the NRA also has a significant impact among citizens. The NRA, building on centuries of tradition, continues to tie gun ownership to liberty and personal freedom. Whether or not you, personally, the viewer, agrees with this notion, it must be said, this is the angle for the NRA. They are carrying the torch of their forefathers. Like Samuel Colt, the NRA proclaims that guns are more than just objects, they are symbols of freedom. For a long time, the NRA was viewed quite favorably among Americans, and so this messaging was very successful. In recent years, though, they have begun to lose much of this cultural capital. But when we put all of this story into a pot, we get the American gun culture. Up to this point, I have omitted one perhaps large part of American gun culture: media. America is the land of media. Much of this media is very violent, and much of it includes guns. Research on the correlation between violent media consumption and violent behavior has produced mixed findings. This media is a part of the American gun culture, but if we blame violent video games, movies, and music for this culture, I think we are looking at the equation from the wrong end. After all, violent media does not just erupt out of nowhere and produce violent behavior en masse. Video games, movies, music are all created as reflections of American sensibilities. Companies produce violent media because America wants violent media. These things are part of the existing gun culture, and maybe they even exacerbate that culture. But they are not the cause of it. They are more symptoms and virus. It seems to me that America's affinity for guns comes from 3 places. It is the sum of 3 parts: tradition, rights, and mythology. In this country, we have a long-standing tradition of gun violence. The landmass was conquered through gun violence. The country itself was founded on gun violence. Time and time again, social conflicts have been solved through the means of force, often with a firearm. This macro tradition has leaked into the micro. For some Americans, guns are now a legitimate way to settle disputes or control groups of people. The right to own guns is expressed in the American Bill of Rights. The country was founded with firearms in mind in one way or the other. But due to aging language, changing times, and increasing polarization, there is little agreement on how exactly America should protect this right. Guns have a profound mythological meaning in America. In the very early days of the country, capitalists began active efforts to galvanize the mythology of guns within American culture. They were successful, and this is a process which has not stopped. Its effects have not abated. For hundreds of years, American companies and organizations have produced messaging that ties guns directly to American identity. All nations around the world have their collective cultural interests. Guns are the American incarnation of this phenomenon. Gun control activists say,
Yeah, but its inception still goes back to the material interests of gun manufacturers that want to turn a profit, that want to sell their product. When we finally discuss Syria, please talk about Syria. You never do. I have. There are numerous videos on Syria on my YouTube page. The last guy that came in and yelled at me for not talking about Syria came back an hour later and said, "Actually, my bad. You did cover it pretty extensively." Unless you are the same chatter. I don't think he's the same chatter.
Say that something must give, that gun violence is out of control, and that we simply must act. More often than outright removal of firearms, activists often demand a compromise that takes the form of increased gun regulation. The other side says that we already have regulations in place, that they already have compromised. They point to the thousands and thousands of gun laws which already exist on federal, state, and local levels. This debate just goes on, and I'm not really sure what the path forward is. But I do think that understanding the gun within American history and mythology could be a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think good video. It tackles one aspect of it. It definitely does exactly what its stated purpose is, which is the historical context as to why Americans are so obsessed with guns. There are negatives and sadness that come with gun ownership, but the U.S. was literally created because of the independence we got with guns from the Brits. I think on the spectrum, 2005 is literally Neek Skit, also known as Charitable Chinchilla. I'm beginning to recognize that this is the same person. They've just gotten more mentally ill in the process of them being permanently banned. I think it's an alt account. I mean, given that the account creation and following since date is identical, I suspect that this is a formerly banned chatter. I really don't know who you're talking about. Okay. Anyway, but it goes beyond simply the culture. But I think the video actually factored in the constitutional interpretation and how that has changed, and ultimately, like why America is so unique. He's 19 years old. Looking at his username, the banned person was older, if I recall correctly. No, Neek Skit is like 19. So actually, I actually now definitely think it's him. I don't know. I thought Neek Skit was younger than 19 even. Yeah, this chatter is probably not him. I also don't believe that Neek Skit was actually 15 when he said he was 15. Why do you know this random chatter? There's just a lot of people who become prominent members of the community by saying the absolute dumbest shit. There are members in the community that are prominent because of how productive they are, as Hasanabi heads in the chat. And then there are people in the community that just say a whole bunch of just some of the dumbest shit you've ever encountered. And they basically become side characters until they inevitably get banned, actually. Productive chatters who are ultimately inoffensive rarely ever get banned unless they become incredibly annoying. The unproductive chatters that simply work to derail every conversation do end up getting banned when they reach a level of nuisance with, I don't know, I think there's like chatters who maybe read a little bit too much into like becoming famous side characters in the chat. It starts off with like seeking out my attention, and then it turns into a whole problem on its own. Anyway, that was a good video. I wonder if there's like a summarization of Bowling for Columbine, specifically the gun violence and ease of access to weapons part. I think a chatter sent me a shorter version of the overall documentary. I don't want to watch the whole thing. I'm waiting in the chat for the right time to make my Why I Left the Lev video. I mean, this is just a clip.
Happily ever after.
Okay, a lot of that is just, it doesn't tackle the underlying material, the underlying material interest, like profit interest of the corporations that sell the guns, but rather how it was packaged and sold to a broader public by talking about it within the framework of white supremacy, which is once again to sell anything to the broadest American public. Anyway, it's a long article, but this touches how the surplus of weapons fueled gun culture. No, I'm done. I'm done like looking into all the stuff. I'm just gonna go back and summarize what we know. Timeline. Okay. Earlier today, at least 2 people were killed and multiple others were injured after a shooting in a school in Madison, Wisconsin. This is a private Christian school. The suspected shooter is also dead, according to Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes. The suspected shooter is speculated to be 17 years old and a female. Okay, this is what was confirmed by CNN. It is the 83rd school shooting of 2024, surpassing 2023 for the most school shootings in a single year since CNN began tracking such shootings in 2008. Here's the timeline. Someone from the school called 911 to report, 911 to report that there was an active shooter. Officers responded to call at 10:57 a.m. local time, where they found multiple victims suffering from gunshot wounds. Barnes also said the shooting was confined to one space in the building. Medics with the police department were training at a facility 3 miles away and responded. Victims were a teacher and a student that were killed. 6 other people were injured, including 2 students who are in critical condition. Madison Fire Chief Chris Carbon said some of the injured were taken to St. Mary's Hospital and others were taken to the University of Wisconsin hospitals. The suspected shooter was found dead in the building when police arrived, according to Barnes. The juvenile was a student at the school, he said, adding that the police department did not fire their weapons. Police declined to provide any other identifying details about the suspected shooter, but one law enforcement source told CNN that the person was a female. Police are working to determine a motive, and a suspect's family is cooperating, according to Barnes. The gun used was a 9mm pistol, according to law enforcement source. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives is currently running a trace on the firearm to determine where it came from, an agency spokesperson said. Barnes said Abundant Life Christian School did not have a school resource officer. There are currently, according to law enforcement officers, there is no current threat to schools in Madison, Wisconsin, or the community. Joe Biden has been briefed, and a candlelight vigil is set for Tuesday evening in Madison.
Damn, this guy's good.